Lois threatening to leave Peter after he poured scalding grease on her face and put her in the hospital sparked a marriage counseling session that somehow made things worse. Peter literally tricking Lois into signing divorce papers so he could marry their own son for inheritance. Money created the most disturbing Father's Day ever. Lois going on a Christmas rampage through Quahog and attacking innocent civilians with holiday decorations required police tranquilizer darts to stop her psychotic break. And those are just 3 of the divorce-worthy Family Guy moments in this video. Can you imagine all the marriage-ending stuff there is to uncover when we dive deep into 20 times Family Guy should have ended in divorce over the next 2+ hours? I was certainly shocked by some of the stuff I found when I made this video, so if you're ready to be blown away by what's about to come, sit back, relax, maybe check if your spouse is plotting anything suspicious, hopefully without the meth lab, and let's begin. Starting it off with Peter's progress. Peter's progress, the colonial divorce that shocked Quahog. When Family Guy decided to dive into Peter Griffin's past lives, nobody expected to witness one of the most brutal divorce proceedings in television history. Season 7's Peter's Progress doesn't just give us a glimpse into colonial America, it delivers a shocking moment where divorce literally becomes a matter of life and death. The setup, a psychic reading gone wild. The episode begins in typical Family Guy fashion, with Cleveland introducing his Jamaican cousin, Madame Claude, to the guys at the Drunken Clam. Cleveland offers to have her read their palms to determine what past lives they've had. The results are immediately hilarious and disturbing in equal measure. Joe was apparently once an octopus whose tentacles were bitten off by a shark, which explains his current wheelchair situation in the most twisted way possible. Quagmire's past life revelation is even more disturbing. He was Jack the Ripper, the infamous serial killer who terrorized London. This actually makes perfect sense given Quagmire's predatory behavior throughout the series. But Peter's reading becomes the focus of the entire episode when Madame Claude discovers something extraordinary. After Peter jokingly suggests he was probably a strawberry in a past life, Claude reads his palm and discovers he was actually Griffin Peterson, the supposed founder of Quahog. This completely contradicts everything the show had previously established about the town's history, making it clear that the official version was just a myth. Griffin Peterson, the colonial Peter Griffin. The main story follows Griffin Peterson in 17th century colonial America, where he's set to marry Lady Redbush, the colonial version of Lois. From the very beginning, their relationship faces the same challenges that modern Peter and Lois deal with, except amplified by the brutal realities of colonial life. Griffin Peterson is described as a dignified gentleman, which is ironic considering his modern counterpart's complete lack of dignity. However, as the story unfolds, we see that even in colonial times, Peter's essential nature remains unchanged. He's still the same selfish, impulsive character we know, just dressed in period clothing. The colonial setting allows the show to explore themes of power, class, and marriage in ways that wouldn't work in modern Quahog. When King Stuart III, the colonial version of Stewie, sees Lady Redbush with Griffin Peterson, his reaction is immediate and violent. He can't comprehend how such a beautiful woman would choose to marry what he calls that tall glass of poop juice. The king's intervention. King Stuart III represents everything wrong with absolute monarchy and toxic masculinity. His immediate response to seeing Griffin Peterson with Lady Redbush is to have Griffin exiled to the farthest corner of the world. This isn't just jealousy, it's an abuse of royal power that destroys lives for personal satisfaction. The exile scene is particularly brutal because it shows how easily the powerful can destroy the powerless. Griffin Peterson has no recourse, no legal protection, and no way to fight back against the king's arbitrary decision. Carter Redbush, Lady Redbush's father, physically knocks Griffin out and has his servants drop him from a plane into the ocean. The fact that they use an airplane in colonial times is typical Family Guy absurdity, but the violence is very real. Griffin's rescue by a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, where Quagmire serves, adds another layer of historical impossibility that somehow makes the emotional impact stronger. The show is telling us that this isn't really about historical accuracy, it's about the eternal human struggles of love, power, and survival. The forced marriage. With Griffin Peterson out of the picture, King Stuart III wastes no time forcing Lady Redbush into marriage. The wedding scene is uncomfortable to watch because Lady Redbush clearly doesn't want to be there. She's constantly asking about Griffin, hoping he'll show up to stop the ceremony. The interaction between Lady Redbush and her father Carter during the wedding is deeply disturbing. Carter keeps trying to inappropriately touch his daughter, justifying it by saying it's a different time. This scene perfectly captures how women in colonial times had no agency or protection, even from their own family members. King Stuart III's wedding vows reveal his complete narcissism. He compares their love to two figs hanging from a fig tree, cradled by Cupid's own hand, which sounds romantic until you realize he's basically describing himself as the important fig. Even his wedding speech gets interrupted by television promos, showing how his attention span mirrors modern Peter's. The scene where King Stuart complains about the TV promos during his own wedding is pure genius. He stops his own wedding to complain about promotional interruptions, then gets distracted by more promos. This perfectly captures the modern attention deficit that plagues Peter Griffin in every era. Griffin's colonial marriage. While King Stuart is marrying Lady Redbush, Griffin Peterson has been forced into his own marriage situation. He ends up married to the colonial version of Meg, who is just as annoying in the 1600s as she is in modern times. The scene where colonial Meg talks endlessly about cleaning a kettle shows that some personality traits transcend centuries. Griffin's frustration with his new wife is palpable. When she won't stop talking about her cleaning obsessions, he finally explodes with, "Shut up, Meg, I prithee, shut up." The addition of prithee is a hilarious touch that somehow makes the insult both period appropriate and timeless. This marriage represents everything wrong with colonial arranged marriages and social expectations. Griffin Peterson is trapped with someone he doesn't love because of circumstances beyond his control. It's a parallel to modern marriages that happen for the wrong reasons: financial security, social pressure, or simple desperation. The reunion. When Lady Redbush finally finds Griffin Peterson in the New World, their reunion is genuinely touching despite the absurd circumstances. They embrace with real emotion, and for a moment, the show lets us feel the genuine love between these characters. However, the dialogue immediately undercuts the romantic moment with typical Family Guy darkness. Griffin tells Lady Redbush that during their separation, he never stopped seeing your face in the back of my wife's head. Lady Redbush responds that she saw your face in every slave's stomach. These lines are simultaneously romantic and horrifying, perfectly capturing the show's ability to mix genuine emotion with shocking humor. Their promises to be together forever feel meaningful despite the ridiculous context. When they say, "we will," in response to staying together forever, there's real conviction in their voices. It makes what comes next even more shocking. The divorce solution. Here's where the episode takes its most shocking turn. Madame Claude's narration explains that Griffin Peterson and Lady Redbush were happily reunited, but Griffin had to go through the complex, expensive divorce procedure required by 18th century society. What follows is the most brutal divorce scene in television history. Instead of lawyers, paperwork, or court proceedings, Griffin Peterson simply shoots his current wife with a blunderbuss. The sound effect is loud and final. There's no ceremony, no discussion, no attempt at a civilized resolution, just violence. This moment is shocking because it takes the show's usual dark humor to an extreme. We're watching what is essentially a murder being presented as a divorce proceeding. The casualness of it makes it even more disturbing. Griffin Peterson shows no remorse, no hesitation, and no consideration for the life he's just ended. The scene works on multiple levels. It's a commentary on how colonial justice was often arbitrary and violent. It's also a dark joke about how modern divorce can feel like warfare. Most importantly, it shows that even when Peter Griffin gets what he wants, he's willing to destroy everything in his path. The historical context. The episode's portrayal of colonial America is deliberately anachronistic and absurd. There are airplanes, television promos, and modern speech patterns mixed with period costumes and settings. This isn't meant to be historically accurate, it's meant to show that human nature doesn't change regardless of the time period. Griffin Peterson's declaration about equal rights is particularly telling. He starts by saying they'll have equal rights for all, then immediately begins excluding everyone who isn't a white man. Even then, he keeps narrowing the definition until eventually nobody gets any rights. This progression perfectly captures how power structures work in any era. Those in charge will always find ways to exclude others. The colonial setting also allows the show to explore themes that would be too controversial in modern times. The casual violence, the abuse of power, and the complete lack of women's rights are all historically accurate, even if the specific events are absurd. It's a way of commenting on how far society has come, while also showing how many problems persist. King Stuart's pursuit. When King Stuart III discovers that Lady Redbush has been gone for 6 months, his reaction reveals everything wrong with his character. He genuinely didn't notice his wife was missing because he's so self-absorbed. His explanation about their different schedules and his confusion about her whereabouts is painfully realistic for anyone who's been in a neglectful relationship. The dialogue about their lack of intimacy is uncomfortable because it rings true. King Stuart keeps making excuses about being tired, having work, and scheduling conflicts. When Lady Redbush offers immediate availability, he finds new reasons to avoid her. This pattern of avoidance and excuse-making is recognizable to anyone who's experienced a dying relationship. His servant's question about how he could not notice his wife was gone for 6 months is devastating. It exposes King Stuart as completely disconnected from his own marriage. The fact that he thought she was taking a class or something shows how little attention he paid to her actual life. The final confrontation. The standoff between Griffin Peterson and King Stuart III is pure Family Guy absurdity. Both men hold hostages at weapon point, each threatening to kill the other's captive. The repetitive dialogue creates a loop that could go on forever, with each man repeating the same threat over and over. Griffin Peterson's response of, "Knock yourself out, you kill her, I'll kill him," shows either incredible confidence or complete indifference to Lady Redbush's safety. King Stuart's continued threats become meaningless through repetition. The scene builds tension through its very absurdity. The moment when Griffin Peterson holds up his before ultra slim fast picture in the middle of this life or death standoff is perfectly timed comedy. It breaks the tension while also highlighting how silly the entire situation has become. Even in colonial times, Peter Griffin can't stay focused on serious situations. The talent show resolution. The resolution through a talent show is typical Family Guy randomness, but it serves the story well. Instead of resolving their conflict through more violence, Griffin Peterson and King Stuart III agree to settle their dispute through entertainment. The winner gets Lady Redbush's hand in marriage and ownership of the town of Quahog. Griffin Peterson's performance is described as a reference to the Lambda Lambda Lambdas from Revenge of the Nerds, which creates another anachronistic moment that somehow works. The colonial setting allows for these pop culture references that would feel forced in a modern episode. King Stuart III's reaction to their performance shows his competitive nature. He's genuinely impressed by how much work they put into their act and admits he didn't know we could rip off movies. This self-aware commentary on the show's own tendency to reference other media is clever writing that acknowledges the show's methods while using them. The broader implications. This episode works because it uses the colonial setting to examine marriage, divorce, and relationships in ways that modern settings wouldn't allow. The extreme violence and casual brutality highlight how precious our modern legal and social protections really are. Griffin Peterson's willingness to kill his wife rather than pursue a legal divorce shows how far we've come as a society. Modern divorce may be emotionally devastating and financially ruinous, but at least it doesn't involve actual murder. The episode makes us appreciate boring paperwork and court proceedings. The episode also explores how power dynamics work in relationships across different eras. King Stuart III uses his royal authority to steal another man's fiancée, just like modern powerful people might use wealth or influence to get what they want. Griffin Peterson's response is equally extreme, showing that abuse of power often leads to escalating violence. Lady Redbush's complete lack of agency in all these decisions reflects historical reality, while also commenting on modern relationship dynamics. She's treated as a prize to be won rather than a person with her own desires and choices. Even when she's reunited with Griffin Peterson, it's because he fought for her, not because she chose him freely. The modern parallels. The episode works because every character behaves exactly like their modern counterpart, just in period dress. Griffin Peterson is still impulsive, selfish, and prone to extreme solutions. Lady Redbush is still trying to maintain some dignity while dealing with impossible men. King Stuart III is still narcissistic and demanding. These personality consistencies across centuries suggest that human nature is essentially unchanging. The technology and social structures may evolve, but people still struggle with the same fundamental problems. Love, jealousy, power, and violence transcend historical periods. The colonial, Meg's endless chatter about cleaning shows that even across centuries, some people are just naturally annoying. Her detailed description of washing the kettle and finding spots she missed is painfully relatable to anyone who's been trapped listening to someone obsess over mundane details. Griffin Peterson's explosion at Colonial Meg, "Shut up, Meg, I prithee, shut up," is both cruel and understandable. The addition of period-appropriate language, prithee, makes the insult both historical and timeless. It's the same frustration Peter feels with modern Meg, just expressed in colonial terms. This episode stands out in Family Guy's catalog because it takes the show's usual dark humor to an extreme while still maintaining emotional truth. The divorce scene is shocking and brutal, but it serves the larger story about love, power, and the lengths people will go to get what they want. The casual violence of Griffin Peterson shooting his wife with a blunderbuss is presented as comedy, but it's also genuinely disturbing. It forces viewers to confront the reality that our modern legal protections are relatively recent historical developments. Not long ago, might really did make right, and the powerful could destroy the powerless with impunity. The episode succeeds because it uses historical distance to examine contemporary issues. By setting Peter Griffin's story in colonial times, the show can explore themes of marriage, divorce, power, and violence that would be too controversial or depressing in a modern setting. The period costumes and historical setting provide just enough distance to make the dark themes palatable as comedy. Summary: in Season 7's Peter's Progress, a psychic reveals Peter Griffin's past life as Griffin Peterson, the founder of Quahog in 17th century America. Griffin Peterson is engaged to Lady Redbush, the colonial version of Lois, but King Stuart III becomes obsessed with her and has Griffin exiled to steal his bride. After being forced into marriage with colonial Meg while Lady Redbush marries the king, Griffin Peterson is eventually reunited with his true love. However, there's one problem. OPS, he's still married to colonial Meg. The episode delivers its most shocking moment when Madame Claude explains that Griffin had to go through the complex, expensive divorce procedure required by 18th century society. Instead of lawyers or paperwork, Griffin Peterson simply shoots his current wife with a blunderbuss. No ceremony, no discussion, no legal proceedings, just brutal colonial divorce through murder. This moment represents the ultimate divorce scenario, literally ending a marriage through death. While played for dark comedy, it showcases how Peter Griffin's extreme solutions to relationship problems transcend centuries. Even in colonial times, Peter would rather commit violence than deal with complicated legal procedures. The scene works as both historical commentary and relationship satire, showing that while our modern divorce system may be messy and expensive, at least it doesn't involve actual homicide. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Stuck Together, Torn Apart. Stuck Together, Torn Apart, when marriage counseling makes everything worse. In Season 3's Stuck Together, Torn Apart, Family Guy delivers one of its most realistic portrayals of a marriage in crisis, complete with jealousy, surveillance, and a trial separation that nearly destroys the Griffin family. What starts as a simple encounter at a warehouse store escalates into full-blown marital warfare that requires professional intervention. The warehouse store encounter. The episode begins innocuously enough with the Griffin family shopping at Costmart, a bulk warehouse store that's clearly meant to parody Costco. While browsing the massive aisles filled with industrial-sized products, Lois runs into Ross Fishman, an old boyfriend from her past. The meeting is completely innocent, just two old friends catching up and reminiscing about their high school days. Ross invites Lois to dinner to continue their conversation, and she agrees without thinking much about it. This decision sets off a chain of events that will push Peter and Lois's marriage to its breaking point. The warehouse setting is perfect for this encounter because it represents the mundane, everyday situations where marriages can suddenly face unexpected challenges. The store itself becomes a character in the episode, with its bulk products and overwhelming scale reflecting the massive problems that are about to engulf the Griffin household. Peter's reactions to the warehouse's offerings provide comic relief, but they also show his materialistic nature and lack of focus on what really matters in his relationship. Peter's escalating jealousy. Peter's reaction to Lois having dinner with another man is immediate and extreme. Instead of trusting his wife or having an adult conversation about his concerns, Peter chooses to spy on Lois using Joe's police surveillance van. This decision reveals everything wrong with Peter's approach to marriage. He assumes the worst, violates Lois's privacy, and creates drama where none existed. The surveillance scenes are both funny and deeply uncomfortable. Peter uses professional police equipment to stalk his own wife, turning their marriage into a criminal investigation. Joe's willingness to lend Peter the surveillance van shows how the guys enable each other's worst impulses rather than encouraging mature behavior. Peter's paranoia reaches absurd levels as he imagines elaborate scenarios where Lois is betraying him. His jealousy isn't based on any evidence or suspicious behavior, it's purely a product of his own insecurity and possessiveness. The episode shows how destructive jealousy can be when it's allowed to spiral out of control. The surveillance footage reveals nothing more than two old friends having dinner and conversation, but Peter interprets every gesture and smile as evidence of infidelity. This distorted perception is a perfect example of how jealousy can make people see threats that don't exist. The history of Peter's jealousy. Brian provides crucial context by revealing that Peter's extreme jealousy isn't new. It's a recurring pattern that has caused problems throughout their marriage. Through a series of flashbacks, we see Peter's history of attacking perceived romantic rivals, even when they're completely fictional or harmless. In one flashback, Peter punches a movie screen because Lois compliments Hugh Grant's appearance in a film. The absurdity of attacking a movie screen shows how irrational Peter's jealousy can become. He literally cannot distinguish between fantasy and reality when it comes to protecting his territory. Another flashback shows Peter attacking a performer on stage because Lois finds him attractive. This public display of jealousy embarrasses both Lois and their children, showing how Peter's issues affect the entire family. The fact that he's willing to cause scenes in public demonstrates how far his possessiveness extends. The most telling flashback shows Peter punching his own reflection in a mirror after Lois says, "Look at that handsome man." This moment perfectly captures Peter's complete inability to process Lois's attraction to anyone or anything, even when it's directed at him. His jealousy has become so extreme that he can't even accept compliments properly. Lois's breaking point. Lois's frustration with Peter's behavior finally reaches a breaking point when she realizes she can't even have innocent friendships without triggering his jealousy. Her declaration that Peter is suffocating her with his possessiveness is a moment of genuine emotional honesty that cuts through the show's usual comedy. When Lois says she can't even have coffee with a friend without Peter freaking out, she's describing a relationship that has become a prison. Peter's jealousy has isolated her from normal social interactions and turned every outside relationship into a potential source of conflict. Peter's response to Lois's confrontation reveals his fundamental misunderstanding of healthy relationships. He claims his problem is that he loves too much, which sounds romantic but is actually a manipulation tactic. Excessive jealousy isn't love, it's possessiveness and control disguised as affection. The scene where Peter tells Lois to embrace the fear while dancing maniacally shows how disconnected he is from her emotional needs. He's treating their marriage crisis like an adventure rather than acknowledging the real pain he's causing. The marriage counselor's assessment. When Lois calls a marriage counselor, she's taking a mature step to save their relationship. However, the counselor's methods reveal just how dysfunctional the Griffin household really is. His decision to install video cameras throughout their house to observe their uncensored behavior provides an objective view of their daily chaos. Peter's comparison of the surveillance to Big Brother, except somebody will be watching, is both hilarious and revealing. He doesn't understand that the reality show Big Brother is actually watched by millions of people, showing his general ignorance about the world around him. The footage captured by the cameras reveals a household in complete disarray. We see Peter teaching Chris to hula dance while yelling about not angering volcanoes, the family cruelly reading and laughing at Meg's private diary, and various other examples of inappropriate behavior that would shock any outside observer. The counselor's reaction to the video footage is immediate. He recommends a trial separation with the advice that both Peter and Lois should date other people. This recommendation shows just how broken their relationship has become. Rather than trying to repair their marriage, the professional suggests they explore other options. The trial separation. Peter's reaction to the separation recommendation reveals his immaturity and selfishness. Instead of being devastated about potentially losing his wife, he seems almost excited about the prospect of dating other people. This response shows that he doesn't understand the seriousness of their situation. Peter moves out of the house and initially tries to stay with Cleveland, but this arrangement quickly falls apart due to Cleveland and Loretta's own marital problems. The fact that Peter can't even find a stable place to stay during his separation highlights how unprepared he is for life without Lois. When Peter ends up staying with the Goldmans, we see a different side of his character. Mort's simple lifestyle and gentle nature provide a stark contrast to Peter's chaotic existence. However, Peter still doesn't use this time for self-reflection or personal growth. The separation period shows how much Lois does to keep the Griffin household functioning. Without her constant management, Peter's life quickly becomes unstable and directionless. This should be a wake-up call about how much he depends on his wife, but Peter remains oblivious. The Jennifer Love Hewitt date. Mort's arrangement of a date between Peter and Jennifer Love Hewitt, who is revealed to be Mort's niece, creates the episode's most absurd romantic subplot. Peter's behavior on this date is so atrocious that it should end any possibility of romance, yet somehow it has the opposite effect. Peter's table manners are disgusting. He devours an entire pie as an appetizer and then tries to hand-feed Jennifer bread with his unwashed hands. These behaviors would repel any normal person, but Jennifer finds herself inexplicably attracted to his crude authenticity. The restaurant scene becomes a disaster when Peter excuses himself to use the restroom and returns having failed to wash his hands. His attempt to spoon-feed Jennifer bread after this display of poor hygiene should be the final straw, but instead, it triggers her unexpected attraction to his unfiltered behavior. Jennifer's admission that Peter is the most vile, disgusting human being she's ever met, followed immediately by saying she's never been more turned on, creates one of the episode's most twisted romantic moments. This reaction suggests that some people are attracted to authenticity, even when it comes in the form of terrible behavior. Lois's date with Quagmire. While Peter is on his disastrous date, Lois agrees to go out with Quagmire, creating a situation that should be deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. Quagmire's immediate enthusiasm about Lois being available reveals his predatory nature and long-standing attraction to his best friend's wife. The fact that both couples end up at the same restaurant on the same night creates a perfect storm of jealousy and confrontation. This coincidence forces both Peter and Lois to confront their feelings about seeing each other with other people. Quagmire's behavior during the date shows his complete lack of boundaries or respect for the Griffin family's situation. His order of a roofie colada for Jennifer at the end of the episode reveals his predatory intentions and complete moral bankruptcy. The restaurant setting becomes a battleground where the true state of Peter and Lois's marriage will be revealed. Seeing each other with potential new partners forces both of them to confront what they really want from their relationship: Lois's violent jealousy. The episode's most shocking moment comes when Lois sees Peter with Jennifer Love Hewitt and explodes into violent rage. Her attack on Jennifer is brutal and unexpected, revealing that Lois is just as capable of destructive jealousy as Peter is. Lois's insults directed at Jennifer are personal and cruel, attacking both her appearance and her acting career. Her comment about only seeing heartbreakers on a plane when the flight was delayed, so the headphones were free, is a perfectly crafted put-down that reveals Lois's sophisticated cruelty. This moment of violence from Lois serves multiple purposes in the episode. It shows that she's not the rational, mature partner she appeared to be earlier. It also demonstrates that jealousy is a two-way street in their marriage, with both partners capable of destructive behavior. The fact that Lois becomes violent only when she sees Peter with another woman, not when he was spying on her or violating her privacy, suggests that her priorities are just as skewed as his. She can tolerate his controlling behavior, but not his potential infidelity. The mutual recognition. After both Peter and Lois display their jealous, possessive natures, they finally understand each other in a new way. Peter's realization that Lois can be just as jealous as he is creates a moment of genuine connection between them. Their decision to live with their mutually jealous natures represents a form of twisted compatibility. Instead of working to overcome their destructive tendencies, they're choosing to accept them as part of their relationship dynamic. This resolution is both realistic and disturbing. Many couples do learn to accommodate each other's flaws rather than addressing them directly. Peter and Lois's acceptance of their mutual jealousy suggests a mature understanding of their relationship, even if it's not necessarily healthy. The episode ends with them back together, but their fundamental problems haven't been solved. They've simply acknowledged that they're both flawed in similar ways, which creates a kind of toxic equilibrium. The broader implications. This episode works because it shows how marriage counseling can sometimes reveal uncomfortable truths about relationships. The professional intervention doesn't fix Peter and Lois's problems, it actually makes them worse by encouraging them to explore other options. The trial separation serves its intended purpose by showing both partners what they might lose, but it does so through jealousy and possessiveness rather than genuine appreciation. Their reunion is based on mutual dysfunction rather than healthy love. The episode also explores how jealousy can be both destructive and binding in relationships. Peter and Lois's shared jealous nature becomes a form of intimacy, showing how couples can bond over their worst qualities rather than their best ones. The supporting characters in the episode all enable the main couple's dysfunction. Joe provides surveillance equipment, Mort arranges inappropriate dates, and Quagmire eagerly takes advantage of the situation. This shows how social networks can sometimes make relationship problems worse rather than better. Summary. In Season 3's Stuck Together, Torn Apart, Lois runs into old boyfriend Ross Fishman at a warehouse store and agrees to have dinner with him. Peter's extreme jealousy leads him to spy on Lois using police surveillance equipment, escalating their marital problems to the point where Lois calls a marriage counselor. After installing cameras to observe their dysfunctional home life, the counselor recommends a trial separation where both should date other people. Peter goes on a disastrous date with Jennifer Love Hewitt, while Lois dates Quagmire, and both couples end up at the same restaurant. When Lois sees Peter with Jennifer, she explodes into violent rage and attacks the actress. This moment reveals that Lois is just as jealous and possessive as Peter, leading them to reconcile by accepting their mutual dysfunction rather than fixing their underlying problems. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Take My Wife. Take My Wife, when couples counseling becomes a life or death experience. In Season 13's Take My Wife, what begins as a deceptive vacation plan turns into the most extreme marriage counseling experience ever depicted on Family Guy. The episode explores relationship dynamics, compatibility, and the lengths people will go to save their marriages when faced with mortal danger. The poker game setup. The episode opens with the guys enjoying their regular poker game in Peter's basement, completely unaware that their wives are orchestrating a major intervention in their relationships. Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe are focused on their cards and casual conversation when Lois, Donna, and Bonnie make their surprise announcement about a couples-only vacation to the Bahamas. The wives present this as a romantic getaway, emphasizing the exclusive couples-only nature of the resort. However, this immediately creates a problem for Quagmire, who doesn't have a steady partner and feels excluded from the group activity. The social dynamics here reveal how couple-focused activities can inadvertently isolate single friends, even within close-knit groups. Lois's decision to arrange for her father Carter to watch the children shows her practical nature and planning skills. She's thinking ahead to ensure the kids are properly supervised while the adults work on their relationships. This detail also sets up the important subplot that will run parallel to the main counseling story. The poker game setting is perfect for this setup because it represents the comfortable, predictable routine that these couples have fallen into. The guys are content with their regular male bonding time, unaware that their wives feel their relationships need serious intervention. Quagmire's last-minute solution. On departure day, Quagmire arrives with Kimi, a new girlfriend he met online, solving his exclusion problem but creating new complications for the group dynamic. Lois's agreement to let them join shows her accommodating nature, but it also introduces an unknown element into what's supposed to be a controlled counseling environment. Kimi's presence as Quagmire's online girlfriend adds a modern element to the relationship dynamics. Online relationships bring their own unique challenges and uncertainties, especially when they're suddenly thrust into intensive couples therapy situations. The fact that Quagmire found her online suggests this is a relatively new and potentially superficial connection. The decision to allow Kimmy to join demonstrates how group dynamics can be disrupted by last-minute additions. What was planned as therapy for established couples now includes a brand new relationship that hasn't been tested by time or real-world challenges. The counseling revelation. Upon arriving at what they believed would be a relaxing beach resort, the couples discover they've been tricked into attending a relationship counseling retreat. This deception creates immediate tension, particularly among the men who feel manipulated and trapped in a situation they never agreed to enter. The guy's upset reaction to being tricked reveals their resistance to addressing relationship issues directly. Their half-hearted participation shows how difficult it can be to force people into therapy when they don't believe they need it. This resistance is common in real-world relationship counseling situations. The counselor Noel represents an unconventional approach to relationship therapy. Rather than working with existing couples to improve their relationships, he takes the radical step of determining that the couples are poorly matched and reassigning partners. This approach challenges traditional assumptions about relationship counseling and compatibility. The partner reassignment experiment. Noel's decision to create new pairings based on his assessment of compatibility creates an unprecedented situation in relationship therapy. The new combinations, Peter with Kimmy, Lois with Cleveland, Joe with Donna, and Quagmire with Bonnie, force everyone to interact with different personality types and relationship styles. Some of these new pairings work surprisingly well, which raises uncomfortable questions about whether people are truly with their optimal partners. The success of certain combinations suggests that compatibility might be more flexible than people assume, or that novelty itself can create temporary attraction and harmony. However, the experiment also triggers intense jealousy, particularly from Lois, regarding Peter's pairing with Kimmy. This jealous reaction reveals that regardless of compatibility assessments, emotional attachments and possessiveness run deeper than rational analysis might suggest. Lois's admission that coming to the resort was a mistake and her demand to leave shows how quickly relationship experiments can backfire. What she intended as helpful intervention has created more problems than it solved, demonstrating the unpredictable nature of relationship therapy. The violent interruption. Just as the relationship tensions reach a breaking point, a Bahamian rebellion breaks out, completely changing the nature of their crisis. The sudden shift from relationship problems to physical survival creates a life or death situation that puts their compatibility concerns into stark perspective. Noel's death during the rebellion eliminates the authority figure who was orchestrating their relationship experiment. Without the counselor's guidance and structure, the couples are left to navigate both their relationship issues and their physical survival on their own. Peter's accidental shooting down of a passing plane while trying to signal for help demonstrates his tendency to make situations worse through well-intentioned but poorly executed actions. This moment shows how Peter's impulsive nature can create disasters even when he's trying to help. The rebellion serves as an external pressure that forces the couples to work together regardless of their assigned pairings. Real danger has a way of clarifying what truly matters in relationships, stripping away artificial compatibility exercises in favor of genuine survival needs. The capture and execution threat. The capture of all the couples by the rebels creates the ultimate test of their relationships. Facing potential execution, they must confront what really matters to them and who they truly want to be with when everything else is stripped away. The rebels' frustration with American tourists adds a political dimension to the episode, commenting on how Americans abroad can be perceived as entitled and disruptive. The lead rebel's specific annoyance at being asked if he's the guy from Captain Phillips shows how Hollywood stereotypes can affect real people's lives. Being threatened with execution forces each couple to examine their relationships under the most extreme circumstances possible. When facing death, people tend to focus on their most genuine emotions rather than petty complaints or compatibility assessments. The 2x2 execution format creates mounting tension as couples are led away and gunshots are heard. This structure builds suspense while also allowing for final moments of intimacy between partners who may have been taking each other for granted. Peter and Lois's final moments. As the last couple remaining, Peter and Lois face what they believe to be their final moments together. This situation strips away all the artificial relationship exercises and compatibility concerns, leaving only their core emotional connection. Their admission of love for each other in the face of death represents the most genuine moment in their relationship during the entire episode. All the counseling games and partner swapping become irrelevant when confronted with the possibility of permanent separation. The gunshots heard after they're led away create a moment of apparent tragedy that seems to confirm the worst fears about their fate. This climactic moment appears to end their story on a note of tragic romance, with love declared just moments before death. The elaborate deception revealed. The revelation that the entire execution scenario was staged by Noel, who faked his own death, reframes the entire experience as an extreme form of relationship therapy. This twist shows that everything from the rebellion to the execution threats was carefully orchestrated to push the couples to their emotional breaking points. Noel's methods represent the most extreme form of couples counseling imaginable, using life or death situations to force people to confront their true feelings. This approach raises serious ethical questions about consent and the lengths therapists might go to achieve breakthrough moments. The staged nature of the crisis doesn't diminish its emotional impact on the couples. Their fear was real, their declarations of love were genuine, and their experience of facing death together created authentic bonding moments, regardless of the artificial circumstances. However, Noel's elaborate deception is undermined when Peter casually mentions shooting down a real plane during their escape attempt. This detail reveals that actual consequences resulted from the fake scenario, adding a dark twist to what was supposed to be therapeutic theater. The futility of the exercise. The episode ends with everything returning to normal, suggesting that despite the extreme measures taken, no lasting changes resulted from the counseling experience. The couples return to their original pairings and their original relationship patterns, making the entire ordeal seem pointless. This return to the status quo reflects a cynical view of relationship therapy and personal growth. Despite experiencing life-threatening danger and having profound emotional revelations, the characters quickly revert to their established behaviors and relationship dynamics. The futility of the counseling experience suggests that some relationship patterns are too deeply ingrained to change, even when confronted with extreme circumstances. People may declare love in crisis situations but still struggle with day-to-day compatibility issues when normalcy returns. Carter and the children's subplot. Meanwhile, Carter's attempts to engage the Griffin children in old-fashioned activities provide a parallel story about generational differences and the impact of technology on family relationships. His frustration with their electronic device dependence reflects broader cultural concerns about screen time and traditional childhood experiences. Carter's initial attempts at swimming, jacks, and exercise fail to capture the children's interest, showing how different generations have fundamentally different ideas about entertainment and engagement. His persistence in trying to connect with them despite their resistance shows genuine care for their development. The turning point comes when Carter introduces them to old-fashioned pranks, which finally capture their imagination and enthusiasm. This success suggests that connecting across generational lines requires finding common ground rather than simply imposing traditional activities. The children's brief resistance to television when Peter and Lois return, followed by their immediate capitulation to police chases that end in fire, shows how quickly people revert to comfortable habits. This mirrors the main story's theme about the difficulty of creating lasting behavioral change. The broader commentary. The episode works as a commentary on the couples counseling industry and the extreme measures some people will take to fix their relationships. Noel's methods represent the logical extreme of intensive relationship therapy, pushing participants far beyond their comfort zones. The failure of both the relationship counseling and Carter's generational intervention suggests a pessimistic view of personal growth and change. Despite extreme circumstances and genuine effort, everyone returns to their established patterns and preferences. The episode also explores themes of authenticity in relationships. The most genuine moments between Peter and Lois occur when they believe they're about to die, suggesting that extreme circumstances reveal true feelings better than therapeutic exercises. The contrast between the adults' relationship drama and the children's simple preference for electronic entertainment highlights different priorities across age groups. While the adults complicate their lives with elaborate relationship interventions, the children are content with straightforward digital pleasures. Summary: in Season 13's Take My Wife, the wives trick their husbands into attending a Bahamas couples counseling retreat, with Quagmire bringing his online girlfriend Kimmy. Counselor Noel declares the couples poorly matched and reassigns partners, causing jealousy especially from Lois over Peter's pairing with Kimmy. Just as Lois demands to leave, a Bahamian rebellion breaks out, and Noel is apparently killed, forcing everyone to flee for their lives. After being captured and facing execution, Peter and Lois admit their love for each other, believing they're about to die. The entire crisis is revealed to be an elaborate therapeutic deception staged by Noel to help couples find their true feelings, though Peter's accidental downing of a real plane during the fake emergency creates actual consequences. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Death Lives. Death Lives, the anniversary. Peter nearly destroyed everything. In Season 3's Death Lives, Family Guy delivers one of its most emotionally complex episodes, combining Peter's typical selfishness with genuine supernatural intervention and a devastating vision of his marriage's potential future. What begins as Peter's attempt to skip out on his anniversary obligations turns into a life-changing encounter with death himself. The anniversary setup. The episode opens on Peter and Lois's wedding anniversary, a day that should be about celebrating their love and commitment to each other. Instead of planning something romantic or meaningful, Peter sends Lois on an elaborate scavenger hunt, specifically designed to keep her busy, while he sneaks off to play golf at the prestigious Barrington Country Club. This setup immediately establishes Peter's priorities and his fundamental misunderstanding of what marriage requires. Rather than seeing their anniversary as an opportunity to strengthen their relationship, he views it as an obligation to escape from. The scavenger hunt isn't a romantic gesture, it's a calculated distraction designed to buy him time for selfish pursuits. Peter's choice of Barrington Country Club is significant because it represents his aspirations to higher social status. He's willing to sacrifice precious time with his wife on their anniversary for the chance to play golf at an exclusive venue where he doesn't really belong. This decision reflects his ongoing struggle with self-worth and his tendency to seek validation in all the wrong places. The scavenger hunt itself shows Peter's capacity for elaborate planning when it serves his selfish interests. He's clearly put thought and effort into creating clues that will keep Lois occupied, demonstrating that he's capable of thoughtful gestures when they benefit him rather than his wife. The lightning strike. While playing golf at Barrington, Peter is struck by lightning, an event that serves as both literal and metaphorical divine intervention. The lightning strike occurs because Peter ignores obvious safety warnings about the approaching storm, choosing to continue his selfish pursuits despite clear danger signals. The physical comedy of Peter being struck by lightning is typical Family Guy humor, but the consequences are far more serious than usual. Instead of just providing a quick sight gag, the lightning strike serves as the catalyst for Peter's most important spiritual experience in the entire series. Peter's encounter with death begins with his typical sarcasm and resistance to authority. Even when faced with a supernatural being who controls life and death, Peter maintains his defensive attitude and refuses to take responsibility for his actions. This reaction shows how deeply ingrained his selfishness has become. Death's appearance is both intimidating and strangely sympathetic. He's not portrayed as evil or malicious, but rather as someone trying to help Peter understand the consequences of his behavior before it's too late. This characterization makes Death more of a counselor than a threat. Death's devastating revelation. Death's most shocking revelation is his vision of Peter and Lois's future, where Peter's continued neglect of their marriage leads to divorce and his eventual suicide. This prophecy isn't presented as inevitable fate, but rather as the logical conclusion of Peter's current behavioral patterns. The vision shows that Lois eventually reaches her breaking point with Peter's selfishness and files for divorce. This isn't portrayed as Lois being unreasonable or giving up too easily. It's shown as the natural result of years of being taken for granted and neglected by someone who claims to love her. The timeline Death provides is specific and devastating. Lois divorces Peter, and 2 years after the divorce, Peter commits suicide. This detail about the suicide reveals that despite his apparent indifference to his marriage, losing Lois would ultimately destroy Peter completely. Death's prediction serves as the ultimate wake-up call, showing Peter that his behavior isn't just annoying or inconsiderate, it's literally life-threatening. The supernatural intervention is necessary because Peter has proven incapable of recognizing these consequences on his own. The flashback to their courtship. Death takes Peter back in time to witness his courtship of Lois, providing crucial context about how their relationship began and what made it special. These flashbacks serve to remind Peter of what he's risking and why their marriage was worth fighting for in the first place. The courtship scenes show a younger, more determined Peter who was willing to face any obstacle to win Lois's love. Carter Pewterschmidt's violent opposition to their relationship, including having Peter knocked unconscious and dropped from a plane into the ocean, demonstrates the extreme lengths Peter once endured for love. Peter's rescue by the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, where Quagmire serves, adds both humor and heroism to his origin story. Even after being literally thrown from a plane, Peter doesn't give up on pursuing Lois. This persistence contrasts sharply with his current tendency to avoid relationship responsibilities. The chase scene with Cleveland, where they're pursued by Ku Klux Klan members, adds historical context and shows the dangers Peter was willing to face for love. Peter's confusion about being chased by ghosts provides comic relief while highlighting the real dangers they faced. Carter's $1 million offer. One of the episode's most revealing moments comes when Carter Pewterschmidt offers Peter $1 million to stay away from Lois. This scene tests Peter's commitment and provides one of his most genuinely romantic statements in the entire series. Peter's response to the money offer becomes legendary. "Lois may be worth $1 million to you, but to me, she's worthless." This line appears to be an insult until he completes the thought. "I love her, Mr. Pewterschmidt." The wordplay creates a moment that's both funny and genuinely touching. This declaration shows that despite his many flaws, Peter's love for Lois has always been genuine and not motivated by financial considerations. He's willing to give up an enormous sum of money for the chance to be with her, demonstrating that his priorities were once properly aligned. The contrast between past Peter's willingness to sacrifice money for love and present Peter's willingness to sacrifice love for golf shows how far he's fallen from his original romantic ideals. This regression makes Death's intervention even more necessary and urgent. Peter's deal with Death. In exchange for Death's help in saving his marriage, Peter agrees to help Death get a date with Amy, a pet shop assistant. This subplot provides comic relief while also showing Peter's capacity for genuine helpfulness when properly motivated. Death's romantic struggles humanize him and create an unlikely friendship between Peter and the supernatural entity. Their bonding over relationship difficulties shows that even cosmic forces can struggle with matters of the heart. The pet shop setting where Death meets Amy is perfect because it's filled with life, providing an ironic contrast to Death's usual associations. Amy's job caring for animals shows her nurturing nature, making her an ideal match for someone who needs emotional healing. Peter's coaching of Death through the dating process reverses their usual dynamic, with Peter serving as the wise advisor rather than the student. This role reversal allows Peter to demonstrate knowledge and empathy that he rarely shows in his own relationships. The Peter Frampton solution. Peter's masterstroke is convincing Death to arrange for Peter Frampton to serenade Lois with their special song, "Baby, I Love Your Way." This gesture represents the kind of thoughtful, romantic action that Peter should have planned for their anniversary in the first place. The choice of Peter Frampton as the performer adds both nostalgia and absurdity to the romantic gesture. Frampton's 1,970 seconds. Rock star status makes him an unexpected choice for a serenade, but his association with the song makes him perfect for this particular romantic mission. The performance of "Baby, I Love Your Way" serves as both Peter's apology and his declaration of renewed commitment. The song's lyrics about appreciating someone's presence and beauty directly address the neglect that nearly destroyed their marriage. Lois's reaction to the surprise serenade shows that she's still receptive to genuine romantic gestures from Peter. Her delight at the performance proves that their relationship can still be saved if Peter makes the effort to show his love actively rather than just assuming it's understood. The failed rescue mission. The episode's various rescue attempts create escalating comedy while building toward the ultimate resolution. From the Lucky Charms leprechaun to the stock market chaos caused by golf ball brain damage, each failed attempt shows how difficult it can be to engineer the perfect romantic gesture. The stock market subplot, where a businessman's golf ball injury leads to worldwide waffle speculation, demonstrates the butterfly effect of small actions. This chaos serves as a metaphor for how Peter's seemingly minor neglect of his anniversary could have led to massive consequences for his family. The absurdity of international markets being manipulated by a brain-damaged businessman's random food cravings provides classic Family Guy humor, while maintaining the episode's focus on the importance of paying attention to important details. These failed attempts build tension and show that even with supernatural help, saving a marriage requires more than just good intentions. It requires genuine effort and perfect timing. The emotional resolution. The episode's resolution comes when Peter finally understands what he nearly lost and makes a genuine effort to show Lois how much she means to him. The Peter Frampton serenade succeeds not just because it's elaborate, but because it demonstrates that Peter is willing to make extraordinary efforts to save their relationship. Lois's positive response to Peter's gesture shows that their marriage has the foundation to survive his neglect, but only if he commits to changing his behavior. Her willingness to forgive and move forward demonstrates the strength of her love, but also serves as a warning that this forgiveness isn't unlimited. Death's successful date with Amy provides a parallel happy ending that shows how relationships can work when both parties make genuine efforts to connect. Their romance serves as a positive example of what Peter and Lois could achieve if they both prioritize their relationship. The episode ends with renewed hope for the Griffin marriage, but also with the understanding that this is Peter's last chance to get things right. Death's prophecy still hangs over their relationship as a warning about what could happen if Peter reverts to his selfish ways. The supernatural intervention theme. The episode works because it takes Peter's relationship problems seriously enough to require supernatural intervention. Death's involvement shows that Peter's marriage issues aren't just sitcom conflicts, they're life and death situations that require dramatic action to resolve. The use of death as a relationship counselor is both humorous and profound. It suggests that some people need to confront their own mortality before they can appreciate what they have in their lives. Peter's near-death experience becomes a form of extreme couples therapy. The time travel elements allow the episode to explore Peter and Lois's relationship history while maintaining focus on their current problems. The flashbacks provide context and motivation without becoming pure nostalgia or avoiding present responsibilities. Death's own romantic subplot prevents him from being simply a wise advisor or moral authority. His struggles with dating make him more relatable and show that relationship difficulties are universal, even among supernatural beings. The anniversary significance. The anniversary setting makes Peter's neglect even more inexcusable and the stakes even higher. This isn't just any day he's chosen to prioritize golf over his wife, it's the specific day meant to celebrate their marriage and commitment to each other. Peter's elaborate scavenger hunt plan shows that he's capable of thoughtful preparation when it serves his interests. The fact that he used this capability to avoid his wife rather than please her makes his behavior even more selfish and inexcusable. The contrast between what the day should represent, celebration of their love, and what Peter turned it into, an opportunity for selfish escape, highlights how far his priorities have drifted from what marriage requires. Lois's participation in the scavenger hunt, even though it's designed to distract her, shows her willingness to engage with Peter's efforts and find joy in their relationship despite his shortcomings. Summary. In Season 3's Death Lives, Peter sends Lois on a scavenger hunt on their anniversary so he can sneak off to play golf at Barrington Country Club. While golfing, Peter is struck by lightning and has a near-death experience, where death shows him a devastating vision of the future. Lois will eventually divorce him due to his neglect, and Peter will commit suicide 2 years later. Death takes Peter back in time to witness his courtship of Lois, including Carter's violent opposition and Peter's $1 million rejection of Carter's bribe. In exchange for saving his marriage, Peter helps Death get a date with Amy from the pet shop. Peter's solution is having Death arrange for Peter Frampton to serenade Lois with their song, Baby, I Love Your Way, creating a genuine romantic gesture that saves their relationship and shows Peter what he nearly lost through his selfishness. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to a very special Family Guy, Freakin' Christmas. A very special Family Guy, Freakin' Christmas, when your wife's holiday meltdown goes too far. In Season 3's A Very Special Family Guy, Freakin' Christmas, Lois Griffin has what might be the most public and destructive mental breakdown ever shown on Family Guy. What starts as normal Christmas stress turns into a full-blown psychological episode that would have most normal husbands seriously considering divorce papers. The setup: normal Christmas chaos. The episode begins with typical Christmas preparation stress. Lois is trying to manage everything: decorating the house, buying gifts, planning meals, and making sure everyone participates in her vision of the perfect family Christmas. She's forcing Brian to wear an ugly sweater she made, dealing with Peter's confusion about gift tags, and trying to get Stewie to go to sleep. At first, this looks like normal holiday stress that every family deals with. Wives often take on more of the Christmas planning and preparation, and husbands usually go along with it to keep the peace. Peter seems relatively cooperative, even if he's not particularly helpful, but there are warning signs that Lois is taking things too seriously. She's micromanaging every detail, getting upset about small things like Brian not wearing his sweater, and expecting everyone to match her level of Christmas enthusiasm. Her need for control is becoming obvious. The warning signs escalate. As the episode continues, Lois's behavior becomes more demanding and unreasonable. She's not just asking for help with Christmas preparations, she's expecting everyone to share her obsessive need for holiday perfection. When Peter suggests simple solutions to their problems, like lying about family deaths to avoid obligations, Lois refuses to consider any shortcuts. Her reaction to normal holiday setbacks starts becoming disproportionate to the actual problems. Shopping delays, family scheduling conflicts, and typical Christmas chaos are treated like major crises that threaten the entire holiday. Most concerning is how she starts talking about Christmas like it's her personal responsibility to create magic for everyone else. She's taking ownership of other people's happiness in a way that's both controlling and unsustainable. The public meltdown. Then comes the moment that would make any reasonable husband question his marriage. Lois completely loses it in front of the entire family, screaming about how Christmas doesn't just fall from the freaking sky, but falls out of my holly jolly butt. She starts swearing at her family, telling them they can cook your own damn turkey and wrap your own damn presents. But the worst part is when she tells them they can all ride a one-horse open sleigh to hell. This isn't just holiday stress, age teen. This is a complete mental breakdown happening in front of the children. Any normal husband watching his wife have this kind of public meltdown would be thinking about how embarrassing this is for the whole family. The kids are seeing their mother lose control completely, screaming and cursing during what's supposed to be a happy family time. The aftermath: when your wife abandons the family. After her breakdown, Lois doesn't just take a break or ask for help. She completely abandons her family responsibilities during the most important family holiday of the year. She leaves Peter to handle everything: cooking, shopping, gift wrapping, and managing the kids, without any preparation or transition. This isn't just being overwhelmed and needing support. This is straight up abandoning your family during Christmas because you couldn't handle the stress. Most men would see this as a complete failure to fulfill basic family obligations. The timing makes it even worse. If she was going to have a breakdown, couldn't it have waited until after Christmas? Now the kids' holiday is ruined, family plans are destroyed, and Peter has to figure out how to salvage Christmas with no preparation or warning. The community embarrassment. Lois's breakdown doesn't just affect the Griffin family, it impacts the entire community's Christmas celebrations. This means other families and their children are also affected by her inability to handle her responsibilities. Any husband would be mortified knowing that his wife's public meltdown is now affecting other people's holidays. The embarrassment of having your spouse be known throughout the community as the woman who ruined Christmas would be almost unbearable. The fact that other families were depending on Lois for various Christmas activities makes her breakdown even more irresponsible. She didn't just let down her own family, she let down an entire community of people who were counting on her. Peter's impossible situation. Peter is left in an impossible situation. His wife has completely checked out during the most important family holiday, leaving him to handle everything alone. He has no experience managing Christmas preparations, no knowledge of what was planned, and no idea how to fix the mess Lois created. Most men would be furious at being put in this position. Christmas preparations are complicated and time-consuming. Being expected to suddenly take over everything without any preparation or support would be overwhelming for anyone. Peter tries his best to salvage the situation with elaborate schemes and community help, but he's essentially trying to replace weeks of planning and preparation in just a few days. The pressure and stress Lois dumped on him would be enough to make most husbands seriously reconsider their marriage. The children suffer most. The worst part of Lois's breakdown is how it affects Meg, Chris, and Stewie. These kids are watching their mother have a complete mental episode and then abandon them during Christmas. The psychological damage from seeing their primary caregiver lose control so completely would be significant. Any father watching his wife traumatize their children like this would have to consider whether she's fit to be around them. The kids didn't ask for a perfect Christmas, they just wanted their normal family celebration. Lois's need for perfection ended up destroying their holiday completely. The fact that she prioritized her own stress and emotional needs over protecting her children from trauma shows a serious lack of parental judgment. Most fathers would question whether someone who could break down this badly in front of the kids should be their primary caregiver. The long-term marriage impact. This kind of public breakdown reveals serious character flaws that would be hard to ignore in a marriage. Lois showed that under pressure, she becomes abusive toward her family, abandons her responsibilities, and prioritizes her own emotional state over everyone else's well-being. Her complete inability to handle normal life stress without having a mental breakdown would make any husband question the long-term stability of the relationship. What happens the next time she faces significant pressure? Will she have another meltdown and abandon the family again? The fact that she blamed everyone else for her breakdown instead of taking responsibility for her own emotional regulation shows a lack of maturity that would be concerning in any long-term partner. The precedent this sets. Lois's Christmas breakdown sets a dangerous precedent for the marriage. It shows that when things get stressful, she's willing to completely check out and leave Peter to handle everything. This kind of behavior could happen again during any major life stress, AS, job changes, family illness, financial problems, or other challenges. Most men would worry about being married to someone so unstable that normal life stress can cause complete psychological episodes. Marriage requires partners who can handle difficulties together, not someone who abandons ship when things get tough. The fact that she seemed to recover quickly once the immediate pressure was off suggests that her breakdown was more about avoiding responsibility than genuine psychological crisis. This kind of manipulation would be hard to trust in future difficult situations. Summary. In A Very Special Family Guy Freakin' Christmas, Lois has a complete psychological breakdown during Christmas preparations, screaming at her family that Christmas falls out of my holly jolly butt before telling them to cook your own damn turkey and ride a one-horse open sleigh to hell. She then abandons all family responsibilities during their most important holiday, leaving Peter to manage everything alone while traumatizing the children and embarrassing the family in front of the entire community. Her complete inability to handle normal holiday stress without having a public meltdown and abandoning her family would give any reasonable husband serious grounds to question whether he's married to someone stable enough for long-term partnership and child-rearing responsibilities. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to breaking out is hard to do. Here now is greater than. Breaking out is hard to do when your wife becomes a criminal and destroys your family. In Season 4's Breaking Out is Hard to Do, Lois Griffin commits theft, gets arrested, goes to prison, and then escapes with Peter's help, turning their entire family into fugitives from the law. What starts as shoplifting, a ham escalates into a crime spree that would give any normal husband legitimate grounds for divorce and full custody of the children. The first crime, shoplifting at the grocery store. The episode begins with what seems like an innocent mistake. Lois is at the grocery store and can't afford a ham she wants for the family. Instead of putting it back, choosing a cheaper option, or asking Peter for money, she makes the deliberate decision to steal it. This isn't a moment of desperation or feeding starving children. The Griffin family has money and a house. Lois steals the ham simply because she wants it and doesn't want to pay for it. This reveals a fundamental character flaw. She's willing to commit crimes for personal convenience. Any husband watching his wife shoplift would be mortified. The embarrassment of being married to someone who steals from stores would be bad enough, but the fact that she did it in front of the children makes it even worse. Meg, Chris, and Stewie are now watching their mother commit crimes. The decision to steal shows poor judgment and a lack of basic moral principles. Most men would question what other rules and laws their wife might be willing to break if she's comfortable with theft. The escalation, from shoplifting to crime spree. Instead of being ashamed of her shoplifting and stopping there, Lois gets a thrill from the theft and decides to keep stealing. She starts taking clothes, fine art, car mufflers, and other expensive items just because she enjoys the rush of getting away with crime. This escalation shows that Lois's criminal behavior isn't about necessity, it's about the excitement of breaking the law. She's become addicted to stealing and is choosing to continue committing crimes even though she knows it's wrong. For any husband, watching your wife turn into a habitual criminal would be terrifying. How can you trust someone who's developed a taste for breaking the law? What other crimes might she commit as her need for thrills increases? The fact that she's stealing expensive items like artwork shows this isn't petty theft anymore. She's committing serious felonies that could result in years in prison. She's risking the entire family's future for her own selfish enjoyment. Getting caught and going to prison. When Lois finally gets caught and arrested, the consequences are severe. She's sentenced to prison time, which means she'll be separated from her children and unable to fulfill her basic responsibilities as a wife and mother. Any normal husband would be furious that his wife's selfish criminal behavior is now tearing apart their family. The children have to deal with the trauma of seeing their mother arrested and taken away to prison. The social embarrassment of having a wife in jail would be overwhelming. The courtroom scene makes everything worse when Peter's attempts to defend Lois only result in her sentence being extended from 2 years to eventually 5 years. His wife's crimes have put him in an impossible situation where anything he says or does makes their family situation worse. Judge Dignified Q. Blackman's increasing sentences show how Peter's emotional reactions to his wife's imprisonment are making everything worse. First it's 2 years, then 3, then 4, then 5 years. Peter's inability to control himself in court demonstrates how Lois's crimes are destroying his judgment too. The prison break, making everything worse. Instead of accepting the consequences of her actions and serving her time, Lois convinces Peter to help her escape from prison. This turns Peter from the victim of his wife's criminal behavior into an accomplice in her crimes. Now Peter has to choose between letting his wife face the legal consequences of her actions or becoming a criminal himself to help her. Most men would refuse to risk their own freedom and their children's welfare to help someone who created this mess through their own selfish choices. The prison escape shows that Lois still hasn't learned her lesson or taken responsibility for her actions. Instead of using prison time to reflect on her crimes and change her behavior, she's planning more crimes to avoid facing consequences. Peter's decision to help her escape demonstrates how her criminal behavior is corrupting the entire family. Now he's also breaking the law and risking prison time because of her selfish choices. Life as fugitives, the children suffer. After the prison break, the entire Griffin family has to go into hiding and live as fugitives from the law. The children are forced to live in fear, constantly moving and hiding from police because of their mother's criminal choices. Meg, Chris, and Stewie didn't choose this life of crime, but they're suffering the consequences of their mother's actions. They can't go to school, see their friends, or live normal lives because Lois decided to become a criminal and then escape from prison. Any father watching his children's lives destroyed because of his wife's criminal behavior would be thinking about divorce and full custody. The kids deserve better than being dragged into a life of crime because their mother can't control her impulses. The psychological damage to the children from living as fugitives would be enormous. They're learning that crime is acceptable and that running from consequences is normal behavior. This kind of lifestyle would traumatize most children permanently. The constant danger. Living as fugitives means the family is constantly in danger of being caught by police. Every day could be the day they're all arrested and separated. The stress and fear of this lifestyle would be unbearable for most families. Peter has to constantly worry about protecting his children while also helping his criminal wife avoid capture. This isn't the life he signed up for when he got married. His wife's selfish choices have turned their family life into a nightmare of constant fear and stress. The danger isn't just from police. Fugitive life often involves contact with other criminals in dangerous situations. Lois's crime spree has exposed the entire family to risks and dangers they never would have faced in their normal life. Most husbands would realize that staying married to someone who's turned your family into fugitives is putting everyone at risk. The responsible thing would be to separate from her and try to create a safe, stable life for the children. The moral corruption. Perhaps worst of all, Lois's criminal behavior starts corrupting the entire family's moral compass. The children are learning that stealing is acceptable, that breaking laws is exciting, and that avoiding consequences is more important than taking responsibility. Peter finds himself making criminal decisions and moral compromises he never would have considered before his wife became a criminal. Her bad choices are forcing him to become someone he doesn't want to be. The episode shows how one person's criminal behavior can destroy an entire family's values and way of life. Lois's selfishness isn't just affecting her, it's corrupting everyone around her and teaching the children that crime is normal. Any husband watching his wife turn his children into accessories to criminal behavior would have to consider whether staying married to her is in the children's best interests. The pattern of poor judgment. Lois's crime spree reveals a pattern of incredibly poor judgment that would be concerning in any marriage partner. Her decision-making process consistently prioritizes her immediate wants over her family's long-term well-being and safety. First, she steals because she wants something she can't afford. Then she continues stealing because she enjoys the thrill. Then she chooses prison escape over accepting consequences. Each decision shows worse judgment than the last. Most husbands would wonder what other poor decisions their wife might make in the future. If she's willing to risk the family's safety and stability for the thrill of shoplifting, what other destructive choices might she make? The fact that she drags Peter and the children into her criminal lifestyle shows she's willing to sacrifice everyone else's well-being for her own selfish desires. This kind of selfishness would be hard to forgive or trust in a marriage. The community embarrassment. The Griffin family's criminal behavior affects their entire community and social network. Their friends, neighbors, and extended family all have to deal with the embarrassment and social stigma of being associated with criminals. For Peter, the humiliation of having everyone in Quahog know that his wife is a criminal and that his family are fugitives would be almost unbearable. The social damage to his reputation and standing in the community could last for years. The children would also face social consequences when they eventually return to normal life. Being known as the kids whose mother went to prison and whose family lived as criminals would affect their social relationships and opportunities for years to come. Most men would consider whether staying married to someone whose criminal behavior has damaged their entire family's social standing and community relationships is worth preserving the marriage. The legal consequences. Even if the family eventually resolves their fugitive status, the legal consequences of Lois's crimes could affect them for years. Criminal records, probation requirements, and legal fees would continue to impact their lives long after the immediate crisis ends. Peter would have to live with the knowledge that his wife's criminal choices could resurface at any time to cause new problems for their family. Background checks for jobs, housing applications, and other normal life activities could be complicated by her criminal history. The financial costs of legal defense, court fees, and potential civil lawsuits related to her crimes could drain the family's resources for years. Peter would essentially be paying for his wife's criminal choices long after she stopped committing crimes. The trust issues. Perhaps most importantly, Lois's transformation into a criminal would destroy trust in the marriage. How can Peter ever trust his wife's judgment again after watching her make such consistently terrible decisions? Every time Lois leaves the house, Peter would wonder if she's committing more crimes. Every time she comes home with something new, he'd wonder if she stole it. The constant suspicion and doubt would poison their relationship permanently. The fact that she was able to hide her criminal behavior initially and then escalate it without his knowledge shows that she's capable of deception and manipulation. Most husbands would struggle to trust someone who proved capable of leading a secret criminal life. Summary. In Breaking Out is Hard to Do, Lois starts shoplifting because she wants a ham she can't afford, then escalates into a full crime spree, stealing clothes, art, and car mufflers because she enjoys the thrill of breaking the law. When caught and sentenced to prison, she manipulates Peter into helping her escape, turning their entire family into fugitives from the law. The children are forced to live in constant fear and danger while learning that criminal behavior is acceptable. Their community standing is destroyed, and Peter must choose between his wife's criminal lifestyle and his family's safety and moral well-being. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Throw It Away. Throw it away when your wife's cleaning obsession destroys your family. In Season 17's Throw It Away, Lois Griffin becomes obsessed with a decluttering book and starts throwing away everything in the house, including her own family members. What begins as reasonable home organization turns into a psychological breakdown that would give any normal husband serious grounds for divorce. The decluttering book obsession. The episode starts with Lois reading a popular decluttering book that teaches people to get rid of anything that doesn't kindle joy. At first, this seems like a harmless self-improvement project. Many spouses go through phases of wanting to organize and clean the house more efficiently, but Lois takes the book's advice to dangerous extremes. Instead of just organizing closets or donating old clothes, she starts applying the Kindle Joy test to everything in their home, including family members and essential household items. Peter's confusion about being evaluated for whether he kindles joy shows how bizarre Lois's behavior has become. She's treating her husband like an object that can be discarded if it doesn't meet her emotional criteria. This kind of dehumanizing behavior would be deeply concerning to any spouse. The fact that Lois is getting her life philosophy from a self-help book rather than making rational decisions about her family shows poor judgment and an unstable mental state. Kicking Peter out of his own home. The most shocking moment comes when Lois tells Peter he doesn't kindle joy and asks him to leave the house. This isn't a temporary separation or asking for space. She's literally throwing her husband away like unwanted clutter. Peter's response about who actually pays for the house reveals an important point. Lois is kicking him out of a home that's financially supported by her parents, not even their shared property. She's using her family's money to exclude her own husband from his home. Any man being told by his wife that he needs to leave because he doesn't bring her enough joy would be thinking about divorce immediately. This isn't about relationship problems that can be worked on. She's treating him like disposable garbage. The casual way she delivers this devastating news shows how completely detached from reality Lois has become. She's destroying her marriage based on advice from a book, without any consideration for her husband's feelings or rights. Terrorizing the children. Lois doesn't stop with Peter. She starts evaluating the children using the same Kindle Joy criteria. She tells Meg to get out because her voice is cluttering up my space, showing that she's now treating her own daughter as environmental pollution rather than a human being. The scene where Meg gets literally spit out by a dinosaur, followed by Lois telling her to shut up even though she didn't say anything, shows how hostile and irrational Lois has become toward her own children. She's creating a toxic environment where the kids can't even exist without being criticized. Chris's inability to read becomes another target for Lois's decluttering obsession. Instead of helping her son with his learning difficulties, she sees his struggles as clutter that needs to be eliminated from her perfect home. Any father watching his wife emotionally abuse their children in the name of home organization would be documenting everything for a custody battle. The kids are being traumatized by their mother's psychological breakdown. The complete mental breakdown. As the episode progresses, Lois's behavior becomes increasingly unhinged. She starts throwing away essential items, family belongings, and anything that doesn't meet her impossible standards for bringing joy to her life. The house becomes a sterile, empty white space that looks more like a psychiatric facility than a family home. Lois has eliminated everything that made their house feel like a home where people actually live. Her obsession with perfection has reached the point where she can't tolerate normal family life. The sounds, mess, and everyday chaos that come with having a husband and children are now unbearable to her. When she finally realizes she's eliminated everyone and everything from her life, her breakdown in the empty white space shows the logical conclusion of her obsessive behavior, tint-cop complete isolation and misery. Stewie's reaction reveals the truth. Even Stewie, who's usually indifferent to family problems, recognizes that something is seriously wrong with his mother. His comment that, "When mommy's unstable, I feel unsafe," shows that Lois's behavior is frightening the children. This isn't just about cleaning or organization anymore. It's about a mother who has become so mentally unstable that she's creating an unsafe environment for her own children. Stewie's fear is a clear indicator that Lois needs professional help, not encouragement to continue her decluttering project. The fact that a baby can recognize that his mother is having a psychological crisis shows how obvious her mental instability has become to everyone around her. Peter's desperate attempts to cope. After being kicked out, Peter tries to find somewhere to stay and cope with his wife's sudden rejection. His pathetic attempts to get Quagmire to read him bedtime stories show how emotionally devastated he is by Lois's abandonment. Peter's regression to childlike behavior reveals how much damage Lois's rejection has caused. He's not just inconvenienced by being kicked out, he's been psychologically shattered by his wife's casual dismissal of their marriage. The scene where he bathes with monkeys shows how far he's fallen from normal civilized life because his wife decided he was clutter that needed to be removed from her perfect home. Most men would be furious rather than pathetic in this situation, but Peter's sad response shows how completely Lois's psychological abuse has broken down his self-worth. The children left behind. While Peter is living like a homeless person, the children are left alone with their increasingly unstable mother. Meg and Chris have to navigate living with someone who might decide they're clutter and throw them out at any moment. The kids are forced to walk on eggshells, afraid that any normal behavior might trigger their mother's decluttering obsession and result in them being discarded too. This kind of unstable home environment causes lasting psychological damage to children. Meg's comment about Lois's letter being a suicide note shows how serious the children think their mother's mental breakdown has become. They're genuinely worried that she might hurt herself, but they have no adult support because Peter has been banished. The impossible standards. Lois's decluttering standards become impossible to meet because they're based on her constantly changing emotional reactions rather than practical considerations. What brings her joy one day might irritate her the next, making it impossible for anyone to feel secure in the home. This kind of arbitrary rulemaking creates a hostile environment where family members never know what behavior will trigger the next purge. Living under constantly changing and unreasonable expectations is emotionally exhausting and psychologically damaging. The fact that she eventually decides even her own reflection doesn't kindle joy shows how completely detached from reality she's become. She's literally trying to eliminate herself from her own life. The social isolation. By eliminating everyone from her life who doesn't meet her impossible standards, Lois ends up completely alone. The sterile white space she creates becomes a prison where she has no human contact or emotional support. This isolation is the logical conclusion of her obsessive behavior, but it also shows why her decluttering philosophy is fundamentally flawed. Human relationships require tolerance for imperfection, compromise, and accepting that people have bad days. Her complete breakdown in the empty space proves that eliminating everything imperfect from your life doesn't lead to happiness, it leads to misery and isolation. The pattern of obsessive behavior. This episode reveals a pattern of obsessive behavior from Lois that would be concerning in any marriage. Her tendency to take self-help advice to dangerous extremes shows poor judgment and an inability to apply common sense to everyday situations. The fact that she's willing to destroy her family based on a book's advice shows that she's susceptible to outside influences in ways that could be dangerous in the future. What other self-help guru or lifestyle philosophy might she become obsessed with next? Most husbands would realize that being married to someone who can be manipulated into throwing away their family by reading a book represents a serious long-term stability risk. The financial implications. Peter's long speech about who actually pays for the house reveals that Lois is using her parents' financial support to exclude her own husband from their home. This shows a fundamental misunderstanding of marriage as a partnership. The fact that she feels entitled to kick out her husband while living on her parents' money would be humiliating for most men. Being financially dependent on in-laws while being treated like unwanted clutter by his wife would destroy most men's self-respect. Any husband in this situation would be thinking about divorce not just because of the psychological abuse, but because of the financial manipulation and humiliation involved. Summary. In Throw It Away, Lois becomes obsessed with a decluttering book and starts applying its Kindle Joy philosophy to her family members. First, kicking Peter out of the house because he doesn't bring her enough happiness, then terrorizing the children by treating them as clutter to be eliminated. Her psychological breakdown turns their home into a sterile white prison where normal family life becomes impossible, leaving Peter homeless and the children afraid that any normal behavior might result in them being discarded by their increasingly unstable mother, who needs professional mental health intervention rather than encouragement to continue, destroying her family in the name of organization. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Bill and Peter's bogus journey. Bill and Peter's bogus journey. When your wife cheats with a former president. In Season 12's Bill and Peter's bogus journey, Lois Griffin commits adultery with former President Bill Clinton, then compounds the betrayal by suggesting Peter should sleep with her mother as compensation. This episode presents one of the clearest cases for divorce in the entire series, involving infidelity, manipulation, and complete disregard for marriage vows. The setup: Peter's midlife crisis. The episode begins with Peter having a typical midlife crisis after realizing he's out of shape during a gym visit. When he injures himself trying to help Bill Clinton change a tire, this leads to an unlikely friendship between Peter and the former president. Peter's depression about aging is understandable and something many married couples work through together. However, instead of supporting her husband through this difficult time, Lois becomes annoyed with Peter's new friendship and decides to take matters into her own hands. Most wives would either support their husband's new friendship or discuss their concerns openly. Lois chooses a much more destructive approach that will destroy their marriage and traumatize their children. The fact that Peter is going through a vulnerable time makes Lois's eventual betrayal even more cruel. He's dealing with feelings of inadequacy and aging, and his wife responds by having an affair. Lois's fatal decision. When Lois decides to confront Bill Clinton about his friendship with Peter, she goes to his hotel room alone. This decision already shows poor judgment. Meeting another man in his hotel room is inappropriate for a married woman, regardless of the stated reason. The fact that she ends up sleeping with him instead of having the conversation she claimed to want reveals that her infidelity wasn't accidental or unplanned. She made a conscious choice to cheat on her husband with his new friend. This isn't a case of being seduced or manipulated. Lois is a grown woman who chose to commit adultery. She violated her marriage vows and betrayed Peter's trust in the most fundamental way possible. The timing makes it even worse. Peter is going through emotional difficulties and has found someone who makes him feel better about himself. Instead of supporting this positive development, Lois destroys it through her infidelity. Peter's devastating discovery. Peter walking in on his wife and Bill Clinton in bed together creates one of the most traumatic moments any spouse could experience. The visual of seeing your wife with another man would be permanently burned into any husband's memory. The fact that it's his new friend makes the betrayal doubly painful. Not only has his wife cheated on him, but his friendship with Bill is now destroyed too. Lois has eliminated both his marriage and his friendship in one act of selfishness. Peter's reaction shows genuine emotional devastation. This isn't just anger or disappointment, it's the complete destruction of his trust in the person he thought loved him most. Most men would never be able to get that image out of their heads. The visual trauma of seeing your spouse with another person creates permanent psychological damage that affects the relationship forever. Lois's twisted solution. Instead of apologizing, begging for forgiveness, or suggesting marriage counseling, Lois comes up with the most inappropriate solution possible, offering to let Peter sleep with her mother as compensation for her infidelity. This response shows that Lois completely misunderstands what marriage and fidelity mean. She's treating adultery like a business transaction that can be balanced out with another sexual encounter, rather than recognizing it as a fundamental violation of their marriage vows. The fact that she suggests her own mother shows how twisted her thinking has become. She's willing to destroy family relationships and involve her elderly mother in sexual situations just to avoid taking real responsibility for her actions. Any normal husband would be disgusted by this suggestion. The idea that adultery can be fixed by more adultery shows that Lois has no understanding of love, commitment, or the emotional damage she's caused. The mother-in-law proposition. Babs's willingness to sleep with her daughter's husband reveals that dysfunction runs in Lois's family. The fact that her mother would consider participating in this twisted arrangement shows where Lois learned her distorted values about marriage and commitment. Peter's inability to go through with sleeping with Babs shows that despite his many flaws, he has better moral boundaries than his wife. He recognizes that more infidelity won't solve the problems Lois created with her original affair. The entire scenario is psychologically damaging for everyone involved. The children would eventually learn about this arrangement, creating trauma and confusion about normal family relationships and boundaries. Most men would be horrified that their wife's solution to infidelity involves propositioning family members. This kind of moral confusion would make it impossible to trust Lois's judgment about anything important in the future. Peter's own fall from grace. The episode's conclusion, where Peter also ends up sleeping with Bill Clinton, doesn't excuse Lois's original infidelity. It just shows how her actions destroyed Peter's moral compass and ability to make rational decisions. Peter's affair with Bill can be seen as a direct result of the psychological trauma caused by discovering his wife's betrayal. When someone's world is turned upside down by their spouse's infidelity, they often make decisions they wouldn't normally consider. The fact that both spouses end up being unfaithful doesn't make them even. It just means that Lois's original betrayal created a cycle of destruction that damaged both of them and their entire family. This kind of mutual infidelity makes it impossible for either spouse to claim moral high ground or work toward rebuilding trust. The marriage has become so corrupted that normal reconciliation would be extremely difficult. The children's perspective. Throughout this entire crisis, Meg, Chris, and Stewie are forced to witness their parents' marriage falling apart due to infidelity and bizarre sexual arrangements. The psychological damage to children from parents who cheat and suggest family sex swaps would be enormous. Children need stability and clear moral boundaries from their parents. Instead, they're seeing that adultery is acceptable, that marriage vows don't matter, and that sexual relationships can be treated like business transactions. The long-term effects on the children's ability to form healthy relationships as adults would be severe. They're learning that commitment is meaningless and that betrayal is just something that happens in marriages. Any responsible parent would realize that staying in this corrupted marriage is harmful to the children's emotional and psychological development. The trust issue. Once a spouse commits adultery, especially in such a calculated and callous way, rebuilding trust becomes nearly impossible. Every time Lois leaves the house, Peter would wonder if she's cheating again. Every male friend or acquaintance would become a potential threat. Lois's suggestion that adultery can be solved with more adultery shows that she doesn't understand the emotional and psychological damage that infidelity causes. She's treating Peter's feelings like a debt that can be paid off, rather than recognizing the deep betrayal she committed. The fact that she was willing to involve her own mother in sexual arrangements shows that her moral boundaries are so distorted that Peter could never predict what other inappropriate suggestions or actions she might consider in the future. Most marriage counselors would say that relationships can survive infidelity, but only if the cheating partner shows genuine remorse, takes full responsibility, and commits to rebuilding trust. Lois does none of these things. The pattern of selfishness. This episode reveals a pattern of selfishness from Lois that extends beyond just the adultery. Her original decision to interfere with Peter's friendship was based on her own preferences rather than what was best for her husband's emotional health. When she cheated with Bill, she prioritized her own desires over her marriage vows and family stability. When she suggested the mother-in-law arrangement, she was trying to avoid consequences rather than take responsibility. This consistent pattern of putting her own wants ahead of her family's needs would be deeply concerning to any spouse. It suggests that Lois views marriage as something that should serve her interests, rather than a partnership requiring mutual sacrifice and commitment. Most husbands would realize that someone who shows this level of selfishness during a crisis would likely continue to be selfish during future challenges. The public humiliation. The fact that Lois's affair was with a former president makes the humiliation even worse for Peter. This isn't a discreet affair that can be kept private. It involves a public figure whose romantic relationships become public knowledge. Peter would have to live with the knowledge that his wife's infidelity might become public gossip or media coverage. The social embarrassment of being known as the man whose wife cheated with Bill Clinton would be overwhelming. Their children would also face social consequences, potentially being teased or gossiped about because of their mother's high-profile affair. The family's reputation in their community would be permanently damaged. Most men would consider whether staying married to someone whose infidelity creates ongoing public embarrassment and social stigma is worth preserving the relationship. The Brian subplot, another red flag. Even the subplot about Brian's potty training issues reflects poorly on Lois's judgment and parenting priorities. While her marriage is falling apart due to her infidelity, she's obsessing over forcing Brian to use human toilets instead of addressing the real problems in her family. Her misplaced priorities show that she's more concerned with controlling trivial matters than taking responsibility for the serious damage she's caused to her marriage and family. This kind of focus on minor issues while ignoring major problems is typical of people who avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Instead of dealing with her adultery, she distracts herself with pet training. Summary: in Bill and Peter's bogus journey, Lois commits adultery with former President Bill Clinton, then suggests Peter should sleep with her mother as compensation for her infidelity. When Peter discovers them in bed together, the visual trauma and betrayal destroy both his marriage and his friendship with Bill. Lois's twisted solution shows she doesn't understand that adultery is a fundamental violation of marriage vows that can't be balanced out with more sexual encounters. Her calculated betrayal during Peter's vulnerable midlife crisis, combined with her willingness to involve family members in sexual arrangements rather than take real responsibility, represents one of the clearest cases for divorce in the entire series. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Lois comes out of her shell. Lois comes out of her shell when your wife's midlife crisis destroys your marriage. In Season 11's Lois comes out of her shell, Peter's insensitive comment about Lois's age triggers a midlife crisis that leads to adultery, public humiliation, and behavior that would give any normal husband grounds for divorce. What begins as hurt feelings escalates into Lois abandoning her family responsibilities to chase teenage celebrities. The triggering incident. The episode starts with Brian suggesting a surprise birthday party for Lois, who isn't looking forward to getting older. This is a normal concern many people have about aging, and a supportive spouse would help their partner work through these feelings constructively. Instead, Peter reads a poem at the party that makes Lois feel even worse about her age. His thoughtless words about her getting older hit her at a vulnerable moment when she's already struggling with aging anxieties. While Peter's comment is insensitive, it's the kind of thoughtless remark that happens in many marriages. Most couples would discuss the hurt feelings, Peter would apologize, and they'd move forward together. Lois chooses a much more destructive path. Her decision to completely change her lifestyle based on one insensitive comment shows an unstable reaction to normal marital conflict. This kind of extreme response to everyday relationship problems suggests deeper issues with emotional regulation and maturity. The makeover and lifestyle change. Lois's response to feeling old is to get a makeover and start acting like a teenager. She changes her appearance, her clothing style, and begins adopting behaviors inappropriate for a married mother of 3 children. This isn't just updating her wardrobe or trying new activities. She's attempting to become a completely different person. She's rejecting her role as wife and mother in favor of pretending to be someone decades younger. Most husbands would be concerned about their wife's sudden personality change and attempt to party with much younger people. This kind of dramatic behavioral shift often indicates psychological problems that need professional attention. Peter initially tries to be supportive of some of her changes, showing that he's not completely opposed to her feeling more youthful. However, her behavior quickly becomes excessive and inappropriate for someone in her situation, abandoning family responsibilities. As Lois gets deeper into her new lifestyle, she starts neglecting her responsibilities as a wife and mother. She's more interested in partying with young people than taking care of her family or maintaining her marriage. When Peter gets tired at a party and needs to go home, Lois abandons him to continue partying with teenage girls. This shows that she's prioritizing her new social life over her husband's needs and their marriage commitment. Any husband watching his wife ditch him at parties to hang out with teenagers would be humiliated and concerned about her judgment. She's treating him like an embarrassing burden rather than her life partner. The fact that she's choosing the company of teenage girls over her husband and children shows how completely she's rejected her adult responsibilities. She's acting like she's single and childless instead of married with a family. The public humiliation. The situation becomes even worse when Lois appears on television hanging out with teen girls at pop culture events. Now, her inappropriate behavior is becoming public knowledge, embarrassing Peter and potentially the children. Being married to someone whose midlife crisis is playing out on television would be mortifying for most spouses. Peter has to deal with the community knowing that his wife is acting like a teenager instead of a responsible adult. The public nature of her behavior makes it impossible for Peter to address their marital problems privately. Everyone in Quahog can see that his wife has abandoned her family to chase young celebrities and party with teenagers. This kind of public embarrassment damages not just Peter's reputation but potentially affects their children's social standing and emotional well-being when their friends see their mother acting inappropriately on TV. The Justin Bieber incident. The absolute low point comes when Lois sneaks into a Justin Bieber concert with the intention of seducing the teenage pop star. This crosses the line from inappropriate behavior into potential criminal activity, as she's an adult woman trying to seduce a minor. Her attempt to commit statutory rape shows that her midlife crisis has progressed into genuinely dangerous and illegal behavior. Most husbands would be horrified to discover their wife is attempting to prey on teenagers. Peter's decision to physically intervene and beat up Bieber shows his desperation to stop his wife's increasingly destructive behavior. While violence isn't the answer, his frustration and horror at his wife's actions are understandable. The fact that Lois refuses to come home, even after being caught attempting to seduce a teenager, shows how completely disconnected from reality and moral boundaries she's become. Refusing to return home. When Peter demands that Lois come home after the Bieber incident, she refuses and blames him for calling her names. This response shows that she's more concerned with avoiding criticism than taking responsibility for her destructive behavior. Her refusal to return home after being caught attempting to seduce a minor demonstrates that she's chosen her fantasy teenage lifestyle over her real family. She's literally abandoning her husband and children for the chance to continue her inappropriate behavior. Most men would realize at this point that their wife has suffered a complete psychological break and needs professional intervention. Her inability to recognize how inappropriate her behavior has become suggests serious mental health issues. The fact that she's more upset about being criticized than about nearly committing a crime shows how distorted her priorities have become during her midlife crisis. The inadequate resolution. Even when Peter apologizes and tries to bring Lois home, the underlying issues aren't addressed. His final comment about her age, which causes him to tell her to get out, shows that their fundamental problems remain unresolved. The episode ends without Lois taking real responsibility for her destructive behavior, getting professional help, or making genuine efforts to repair the damage she caused to their marriage and family. This kind of superficial resolution would be unsatisfying for most couples dealing with such serious marital problems. The root causes of Lois's breakdown and the trust issues created by her behavior are never properly addressed. The pattern of avoiding responsibility. Throughout the crisis, Lois consistently avoids taking responsibility for her actions and their consequences. She blames Peter for her initial hurt feelings, then refuses to acknowledge how her response damaged their family. Her attempt to seduce a teenager is treated as just another part of her journey, rather than recognizing it as potentially criminal behavior that could have destroyed their family permanently. Most husbands would be concerned about being married to someone who responds to criticism by abandoning the family and attempting to commit crimes. This pattern of avoiding responsibility while escalating destructive behavior would be difficult to trust in future conflicts. The impact on the children. While Lois is having her public midlife crisis, Meg, Chris, and Stewie have to deal with their mother's abandonment and embarrassing behavior. The psychological impact on children whose mother publicly rejects her family role would be significant. The children are forced to watch their mother choose partying with strangers over caring for her own family. This kind of maternal abandonment creates lasting emotional damage and attachment issues. Her appearance on television acting inappropriately means the children also face social embarrassment when their friends see their mother's behavior. This adds social trauma to the emotional abandonment they're already experiencing. Any responsible parent would recognize that staying married to someone whose behavior traumatizes the children isn't in their best interests, regardless of the marriage commitment. The mental health implications. Lois's extreme reaction to aging concerns, combined with her sudden personality change and dangerous behavior, suggests serious mental health issues that need professional treatment. Her inability to recognize appropriate boundaries, her rejection of adult responsibilities, and her attempt to seduce a minor all indicate that she's experiencing a psychological crisis beyond normal midlife concerns. Most spouses would insist on professional counseling or psychiatric evaluation before considering reconciliation after such extreme behavioral changes and dangerous actions. The fact that she returns to relatively normal behavior without addressing the underlying psychological issues suggests that similar crises could occur again in the future. Summary: in Lois Comes Out of Her Shell, Peter's insensitive birthday comment triggers Lois's midlife crisis, leading her to abandon her family responsibilities, party with teenage girls, and attempt to seduce minor celebrity Justin Bieber. Her public breakdown embarrasses the family, traumatizes the children, and nearly results in her committing statutory rape before Peter physically intervenes. Her refusal to come home after being caught trying to seduce a teenager, combined with her complete avoidance of responsibility for her destructive and potentially criminal behavior, would give any normal husband legitimate grounds for divorce and concerns about her fitness as a parent. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Brie Robot. Brie Robot. When your wife cheats and you find out on TV. In season 17's Brie Robot, while the main plot focuses on Brian creating a robot version of himself, the episode contains a shocking moment that would destroy any marriage. Lois is caught on camera having an affair with an unidentified man. This brief but devastating scene gives Peter grounds for immediate divorce. The setup: Brian's robot distraction. The episode's main story follows Brian creating a robot version of himself to handle responsibilities he wants to avoid. While this provides comedy and explores themes about authenticity versus convenience, it also serves as a distraction from the real crisis happening in the Griffin household. Brian's relationship with Robot Brian, including their eventual romantic involvement, creates chaos that masks the more serious marital problems brewing between Peter and Lois. The family is focused on Brian's unusual situation while missing the signs of Lois's infidelity. This kind of domestic chaos often provides cover for affairs, as the cheating spouse can use family distractions to explain their absence or strange behavior. While everyone is dealing with Brian's robot crisis, Lois has opportunities to pursue her affair without suspicion. The robot storyline also explores themes of authenticity and deception that mirror what's happening with Lois's secret relationship. Just as Robot Brian isn't really Brian despite appearing identical, Lois isn't being the faithful wife she appears to be. The devastating discovery. The most shocking moment occurs when the camera reveals Lois leaving what appears to be a romantic encounter with an unidentified man. She's wearing sunglasses and acting secretive, clearly trying to hide her identity and activities. This isn't a case of innocent socializing or friendship, ECA. The context makes it clear that Lois has been having a sexual affair. The secretive nature of her behavior, the disguise, and the location all point to deliberate adultery. For Peter, discovering his wife's affair through a random camera shot would be particularly traumatic. Instead of confronting him directly or having the decency to confess, Lois allowed him to find out through public exposure. The fact that she's taking such elaborate precautions to hide the affair shows it's been going on for some time. This isn't a momentary lapse in judgment, it's a calculated, ongoing betrayal of their marriage vows. The public humiliation. Having your wife's affair exposed on television adds a layer of public humiliation that makes the betrayal even more devastating. Peter doesn't just have to deal with the personal pain of infidelity, he has to face the entire community knowing about his wife's cheating. The children would also be affected by their mother's affair becoming public knowledge. School friends, neighbors, and extended family would all know that Lois has been unfaithful, creating social embarrassment and emotional trauma for Meg, Chris, and Stewie. This kind of public exposure makes reconciliation more difficult because the affair can't be handled privately. Everyone in Quahog now knows about Lois's betrayal, making it impossible for Peter to work through their problems without community scrutiny. The public nature of the discovery also suggests that Lois has been careless about hiding her affair, showing disrespect not just for Peter, but for their entire family's reputation and standing in the community. The anonymous affair partner. The fact that Lois's affair partner remains unidentified makes the betrayal even more troubling. Peter doesn't know who his wife has been sleeping with, which creates ongoing paranoia about every man in their social circle. Not knowing the identity of the other man means Peter can't confront him or understand what attracted his wife to someone else. This uncertainty would drive most husbands to constant suspicion and anxiety about potential threats to their marriage. The anonymity also suggests that this might not be Lois's only affair. If she's comfortable enough to have secret relationships that even the audience doesn't fully understand, she might have a pattern of infidelity that hasn't been discovered yet. The secretive nature of the relationship indicates that Lois has developed skills at deception and lying that would make it difficult for Peter to trust anything she says in the future. The timing and context. Lois's affair occurs while their family is dealing with other significant stresses and changes. Instead of supporting her husband through the Brian robot crisis, she's pursuing her own selfish interests with another man. This timing shows that Lois prioritizes her personal desires over her family's needs during difficult periods. Most spouses would see this as evidence that she can't be counted on during future challenges or crises. The fact that she's having an affair while her family needs stability and support demonstrates selfishness that goes beyond just the sexual betrayal. She's emotionally abandoning her family when they need her most. The lack of remorse. What makes this situation even worse is that there's no indication Lois feels guilty about her affair or intends to end it. She's caught on camera, but shows no signs of shame, regret, or desire to repair her marriage. Most cheating spouses who are discovered show some combination of guilt, defensiveness, or attempts at justification. Lois's apparent indifference to being caught suggests she's emotionally disconnected from her marriage and family. Her lack of visible remorse would make it nearly impossible for Peter to believe any future apologies or promises to change. Someone who shows no guilt about betraying their family is likely to continue the same behavior. This emotional detachment from the consequences of her actions suggests that Lois has already mentally left the marriage, even if she hasn't physically moved out. The impact on family dynamics. Lois's affair changes the entire family dynamic, even if the children don't immediately understand what they've witnessed. The tension and distrust between Peter and Lois affects everyone in the household. Children are sensitive to changes in their parents' relationship, even when the specific details are kept from them. The stress and conflict created by infidelity typically manifests in various family problems and behavioral changes. Brian's robot situation becomes even more complicated because Peter can't focus on family problems when he's dealing with his wife's betrayal. The affair creates additional chaos that makes it harder to address other issues. The episode's ending, where Lois sells her hair to help Peter, is presented as a loving gesture, but it feels hollow given her ongoing affair. Her attempt to show love through sacrifice rings false when she's simultaneously betraying their marriage. The trust implications. Once Peter knows about Lois's affair, every aspect of their relationship becomes suspect. Her late nights, unexplained absences, and interactions with other men would all become sources of anxiety and suspicion. The secretive nature of her affair shows that Lois is capable of elaborate deception and lying. Peter would have to wonder what other aspects of their life together might be built on lies and manipulation. Rebuilding trust after such a calculated betrayal would require complete transparency from Lois, including ending the affair, cutting contact with the other man, and submitting to whatever accountability measures Peter might require. The fact that she was caught on camera rather than confessing voluntarily suggests that she had no intention of ending the affair or being honest about her behavior. The long-term relationship damage. This kind of betrayal creates permanent damage to a marriage that's difficult to overcome. Even if Peter chooses to stay with Lois, their relationship would never be the same as it was before the affair. The knowledge that his wife was capable of such calculated deception would affect Peter's ability to trust her judgment, decisions, and commitments in all areas of their life together. Their physical intimacy would be affected by Peter's knowledge that Lois has been sharing herself with another man. Many spouses struggle with ongoing images and thoughts about their partner's infidelity that interfere with their own sexual relationship. The emotional intimacy they once shared would also be damaged by Peter's awareness that Lois chose to confide in and connect with someone else, rather than working on their marriage together. Summary. In Robot, while Brian's robot storyline provides the main plot, A devastating moment reveals Lois leaving what appears to be a romantic encounter with an unidentified man, wearing sunglasses and acting secretive to hide her identity. This calculated, ongoing affair, exposed through random camera footage, creates public humiliation for Peter and the children, while demonstrating Lois's capacity for elaborate deception and emotional disconnection from her family. Her apparent lack of remorse and the anonymous nature of her affair partner would make trust impossible to rebuild and give any normal husband clear grounds for divorce. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to model misbehavior. Model misbehavior. Lois decides to become a model against all common sense. During a visit with her parents, Lois starts reminiscing about her teenage dreams of becoming a model. Most married women with 3 kids would recognize that ship has sailed, but not Lois Griffin. Despite her father, Carter's obvious disapproval, and the fact that she's now a middle-aged mother, Lois decides this is the perfect time to pursue modeling. She completely ignores the reality of her situation and announces she's going to give modeling a serious shot, leaving Peter to wonder what happened to the practical woman he married. The modeling career takes off, and Lois changes completely. Against all expectations, Lois actually becomes successful in the modeling world. She books legitimate gigs and starts appearing in professional shoots and fashion shows. However, success goes straight to her head in the worst possible way. The woman who used to pack lunches and help with homework suddenly becomes obsessed with her appearance and career. She starts spending less time at home, becomes increasingly self-absorbed, and begins treating her family like they're holding her back from her newfound stardom. Diet pills and all-night partying destroy family life. Things get progressively worse when Lois's agent, Karen Perota, introduces her to diet pills to maintain her modeling figure. Lois starts taking these pills regularly, which affects her behavior and judgment. She begins staying out all night at fashion industry parties and events, completely abandoning her responsibilities as a wife and mother. The woman who used to be home for dinner is now stumbling in at sunrise, leaving Peter to handle everything while she pursues her selfish dreams. Her priorities have completely shifted away from her family. Peter watches his wife become an object of desire for other men. The modeling career brings another devastating blow to the marriage when Lois becomes the subject of other men's lust and attention. Peter has to watch helplessly as photographers, agents, and industry men openly desire his wife during shoots and fashion events. The intimate relationship he once had with Lois is now being shared with cameras and strangers who see her as nothing more than an attractive object. Peter experiences the humiliation of seeing his wife positioned as a fantasy for other men, while she seems to enjoy the attention more than spending time with her own husband. Peter's desperate measures to save his marriage. Realizing that his marriage is falling apart and his wife has completely lost perspective, Peter becomes desperate to get Lois away from the toxic modeling environment. He makes the difficult decision to team up with Carter Pewterschmidt, despite their usual conflicts, because they both recognize that Lois has gone too far off track. Peter understands that drastic action is necessary to save his family, even if it means working with his father-in-law, whom he typically can't stand. This collaboration shows just how serious the situation has become. The intervention that almost breaks everything. Peter and Carter take extreme measures by actually kidnapping Lois from a Vogue magazine party where she's networking with industry professionals. They physically remove her from her new world and bring her back to the Griffin house against her will. Carter then demands that Lois immediately quit her modeling career, using his typical authoritarian approach. This creates a massive confrontation where Lois feels trapped between her family's demands and her personal desires, putting Peter in an impossible position where supporting his wife might mean accepting behavior that's destroying their marriage. The shocking resolution that changes everything. In an unexpected turn of events, Peter decides to support Lois's right to choose her own path, even though her modeling career has been devastating to their family. He tells Carter that Lois should have the freedom to make her own decisions about her career, despite the personal cost to himself and their children. This moment of selflessness from Peter demonstrates his love for Lois, even when she's been completely selfish. However, when Lois realizes she truly has the freedom to continue modeling without family pressure, she makes the surprising decision to quit the career anyway and return to her family responsibilities. Stewie's business schemes add chaos to an already troubled household. While the main family drama unfolds, Stewie Griffin starts running a pyramid scheme business called Cash Dollar Cam from the house. This adds another layer of dysfunction to an already unstable home environment. Stewie treats his fake business with complete seriousness, creating additional stress and chaos, while Lois is barely present and Peter is trying to hold everything together. The timing of Stewie's scheme perfectly illustrates how the family structure has completely broken down. Brian's desperation leads him to work for a baby. Brian discovers he has worms, but faces a humiliating situation where he needs medical treatment he can't afford. Too embarrassed to ask Peter for help during this family crisis, Brian reluctantly agrees to work for Stewie's pyramid scheme business. This subplot shows how the family's problems cascade down to everyone in the household. Even Brian, usually the voice of reason, gets dragged into questionable situations because the normal family support system has collapsed while Lois pursues her modeling dreams. The fake business collapses like everything else. Brian eventually becomes fed up with pretending that Cash Dollar Cam is a legitimate company and confronts Stewie about the pyramid scheme. This leads to Stewie firing Brian from the fake business, which perfectly mirrors the larger theme of the episode where unrealistic dreams and schemes ultimately fall apart. The subplot reinforces how pursuing selfish goals without considering others leads to broken relationships and failed ventures. Before we move on to how this episode reflects broader relationship dynamics, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown of Family Guy's most relationship-challenging episodes. The aftermath shows the real cost of selfish dreams. By the end of the episode, while Lois returns to her family role, the damage to trust and stability has already been done. Peter had to watch his wife prioritize strangers' attention over their marriage, stay out all night on pills, and completely abandon her family responsibilities. Even though she ultimately chooses family over career, the fact remains that she was willing to destroy everything for personal glory. The episode ends with Peter and Lois together, but any reasonable person would question whether this marriage could survive such a fundamental betrayal of family values and commitment. Summary: in Model Misbehavior, Lois Griffin abandons her family to pursue teenage modeling dreams, becomes addicted to diet pills, stays out all night partying, and allows other men to objectify her while Peter desperately tries to save their marriage. Meanwhile, Stewie runs a pyramid scheme that Brian reluctantly joins due to financial desperation. Despite Lois eventually choosing family over career, the episode highlights how pursuing selfish dreams can devastate marriages and family stability, leaving lasting questions about commitment and priorities. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to sibling rivalry. Sibling rivalry. Lois takes a pregnancy test while marriage falls apart. Lois secretly takes a pregnancy test in the bathroom, clearly anxious about the possibility of being pregnant, despite the serious problems already plaguing their marriage. Any normal husband would be concerned about why his wife is taking pregnancy tests without discussing it first, especially when their relationship is already strained. The fact that she's doing this alone shows the complete breakdown in communication between them. A responsible spouse would involve their partner in something this significant rather than handling it in secret. Peter lists random TV characters as his children, instead of focusing on reality. When discussing the possibility of another child, Peter goes into a bizarre rant listing fictional TV characters as if they were his actual children, including characters from Nick at Night shows, Street Fighter video games, and even basic colors. While Brian tries to correct him, Peter continues this nonsensical behavior instead of having a serious conversation about their family's future. This shows Peter's complete inability to handle adult responsibilities or engage in meaningful discussions about their relationship problems. Lois eats an entire pizza alone at midnight like a food addict. The most disturbing scene occurs when Lois comes downstairs at midnight and casually takes an entire pizza from the refrigerator, announcing she's going back to bed alone. This isn't just a late-night snack. This is compulsive, overeating behavior that suggests serious emotional problems. She's clearly using food to cope with her marital dissatisfaction, but instead of addressing the real issues, she's destroying her health and appearance while making passive-aggressive comments about sleeping alone. Peter openly discusses his wife's weight gain with the family dog. After Lois leaves with her midnight pizza, Brian directly tells Peter that Lois has gotten fat since they stopped having sex and suggests Peter should sleep with his wife. The fact that the family dog has to point out Peter's neglect of his marital duties shows how obvious the problem has become. Peter then describes Lois in the most degrading terms possible, talking about her elbow cleavage and comparing her to fat people's body parts, showing zero respect for the woman he married. Brian admits he would sleep with Peter's wife without hesitation. In perhaps the most relationship-destroying moment, Brian enthusiastically tells Peter he would have sex with Lois regardless of her appearance, saying he would wreck that chick. Peter's response is to call Brian a trooper, rather than being offended that another male is openly expressing sexual desire for his wife. Any normal husband would be furious that someone in his household is talking about his wife this way, but Peter treats it like casual conversation. Peter cruelly mocks his wife's appearance to her face. Peter's treatment of Lois reaches peak cruelty when he calls her Hogzilla directly to her face while asking if she's seen his hot wife Lois anywhere. This isn't playful teasing. This is psychological abuse designed to destroy her self-esteem. He's literally telling his wife that she's so unattractive that he can't recognize her as the woman he married. No person should have to endure this level of humiliation from their spouse. Lois responds with sarcasm. Instead of demanding respect, rather than standing up for herself or demanding that Peter treat her with basic human dignity, Lois responds with sarcastic comments about finding a man who can satisfy her. This passive-aggressive response shows that she's given up on fighting for her marriage and is now just trading insults. Instead of addressing the real problems or seeking counseling, she's engaging in the same toxic behavior pattern that's destroying their relationship. Peter blames Lois's body functions for their problems. Peter's cruelty escalates when he complains about Lois's bodily functions, comparing her flatulence to being burned with a cigarette lighter and directly calling her fat. He's blaming normal human body functions for their marital problems, instead of taking responsibility for his own neglect and cruel behavior. This shows a man who has completely lost respect for his wife as a human being. Before we continue with how this dysfunction affects their approach to family planning, make sure to subscribe if you're following this breakdown of Family Guy's most toxic relationship moments. Lois tries to manipulate Peter into getting a vasectomy. Despite their terrible relationship dynamic, Lois pushes Peter to get a vasectomy instead of taking responsibility for birth control herself. She's trying to force a medical procedure on her husband while offering no solutions for their actual marital problems. This shows someone who wants to control her spouse's body while refusing to address the fundamental issues destroying their marriage. Peter refuses medical procedures while admitting total ignorance. Peter's response to the vasectomy suggestion reveals both his ignorance and stubbornness when he admits he doesn't know what a vasectomy is, but refuses to consider it anyway. This demonstrates someone who makes important life decisions based on fear and ignorance, rather than gathering information and having adult conversations with his spouse. He's completely closed off to any suggestion that might require sacrifice on his part. The marriage becomes a fantasy, role-playing game. The episode's most disturbing revelation comes when Lois tries to initiate intimacy by role-playing as a bad girl, needing punishment, but Peter responds by turning it into a Dungeons & Dragons fantasy scenario. When Lois corrects his game rules, Peter says he'd rather pretend to be a black guy than engage with his actual wife. He's literally choosing fantasy over reality and racial stereotypes over his marriage. Stewie's violence reflects the household's dysfunction. Throughout this marital chaos, Stewie is running around kicking other children and threatening violence, showing how the toxic family environment affects everyone in the house. His aggressive behavior and encounter with his half-brother Bertram mirrors the dysfunction between his parents. The children in this household are learning that violence and cruelty are normal ways to handle conflicts. The family normalizes completely dysfunctional behavior. The most shocking aspect of this episode is how everyone treats this level of marital toxicity as normal family life. Joe and Cleveland discuss vasectomies while completely ignoring the obvious relationship problems, and Brian openly discusses sexual attraction to Peter's wife without anyone finding it inappropriate. The entire social circle enables and normalizes behavior that would end most marriages. Summary: in Sibling Rivalry, Peter and Lois Griffin display the most toxic marital behavior imaginable, with Peter cruelly mocking his wife's weight gain, Lois eating entire pizzas alone at midnight, and both spouses engaging in psychological warfare instead of addressing their sexual problems. Meanwhile, Stewie violently bullies other children, and encounters his half-brother Bertram, reflecting the household's overall dysfunction. The episode demonstrates how a marriage can deteriorate into mutual cruelty and disrespect, while everyone around them treats the toxic behavior as completely normal. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have The Splendid Source. The Splendid Source. Lois ruins family vacation plans by refusing to support Peter's investigation. The episode starts with Peter and Lois planning a family trip to Maine, which should have been a wonderful opportunity for family bonding. However, when Peter discovers that Chris was suspended for telling an inappropriate joke that came from Quagmire, Lois immediately becomes unsupportive of Peter's reasonable desire to investigate where this inappropriate content affecting their son originated. Instead of standing by her husband's parental instincts, Lois acts like Peter's concern for their child's well-being is somehow unreasonable or excessive. Lois shows no concern for Peter's medical condition. When Peter discovers the joke is so funny that it causes him to soil himself involuntarily, any caring wife would be concerned about her husband's physical reaction and possible medical issues. Instead, Lois treats Peter's condition as embarrassing rather than showing compassion for what could be a serious health problem. She offers no support or understanding when Peter is being repeatedly humiliated by his friends, showing a complete lack of wifely loyalty and care for his dignity. Lois refuses to trust Peter's leadership on family decisions. Rather than trusting her husband's judgment about the importance of investigating the joke's origin, Lois constantly questions and undermines Peter's decisions throughout their journey. She acts like Peter's quest to understand something that affected their child is frivolous, when any supportive wife would recognize that her husband is trying to protect their family. Her lack of faith in Peter's parenting instincts shows fundamental disrespect for his role as head of the household. Lois complains, instead of supporting Peter through dangerous situations, when their investigation leads to dangerous situations, including being shot at by mysterious attackers, Lois focuses on complaining about the circumstances rather than supporting her husband through a crisis. Instead of standing by Peter and helping him handle the dangerous situation they find themselves in, she acts like it's his fault they're in danger. A loyal wife would trust that her husband is handling things the best he can under impossible circumstances. Lois panics. Instead of staying calm during the kidnapping, when they're captured by armed men in black suits and forcibly taken to a plane, Lois becomes hysterical instead of remaining calm and supportive during their shared trauma. Rather than working together with Peter to handle their kidnapping situation, she adds to the stress by panicking and making the situation more difficult for everyone involved. A strong wife would help her husband stay focused on survival rather than creating additional emotional chaos. Lois questions Peter's escape plan. Instead of following his lead, when Peter develops a plan to escape from their prison cell on the mysterious island, Lois doubts his strategy instead of trusting her husband's problem-solving abilities. She acts like Peter's plan to stab Cleveland with a pencil to distract the guards is unreasonable when it's actually a clever solution to their imprisonment. Her lack of confidence in Peter's ability to get them out of danger shows she doesn't respect his intelligence or leadership capabilities. Lois shows no appreciation for Peter's heroic actions. Throughout their escape from the secret order of dirty joke writers, Peter repeatedly saves their lives through quick thinking and brave actions. However, Lois never acknowledges or appreciates Peter's heroism in getting them safely away from armed guards and a dangerous criminal organization. She treats his life-saving actions like they're ordinary, instead of recognizing that her husband risked everything to protect her and get them home safely. Lois fails to recognize Peter's dedication to family protection. The entire adventure begins because Peter wants to protect his son Chris from inappropriate influences and understand where harmful content in their household is coming from. This shows Peter's deep commitment to being a protective father and maintaining family values. However, Lois never recognizes or supports this admirable goal, instead treating Peter's parental concerns as an inconvenience to her vacation plans rather than respecting his dedication to their children's well-being. Before we continue analyzing how Lois undermines Peter's efforts to be a good father and husband, make sure to subscribe if you're following this breakdown of Family Guy's most unsupportive wife moments. Lois acts like Peter's quest for knowledge is pointless. Even when they discover that the joke originated from a secret organization dedicated to creating and distributing crude humor worldwide, Lois acts like Peter's investigation was meaningless, rather than recognizing they've uncovered something genuinely significant. She fails to appreciate that her husband's determination led to the discovery of an international conspiracy, instead treating his curiosity and persistence as character flaws rather than admirable traits. Lois provides no emotional support during their imprisonment. When they're locked in a jail cell by the secret order, Lois offers no comfort or emotional support to her husband during their captivity. Instead of working together as a team to maintain morale and hope during their imprisonment, she acts distant and unsupportive when Peter needs his wife's strength the most. A good wife would help her husband stay positive and focused during such a traumatic experience. Lois shows no gratitude. When Peter saves everyone's lives, Peter's quick thinking during their escape leads to him grabbing the world's greatest joke and ultimately destroying the entire criminal facility in a massive explosion. His actions save not only their lives, but potentially protect the world from this organization's influence on society. However, Lois never thanks Peter for his heroism or acknowledges that his determination and bravery saved them all from certain death. Lois fails to appreciate Peter's intelligence and problem-solving. Throughout the entire adventure, Peter consistently demonstrates clever problem-solving skills, from tracking down the joke's origin through multiple sources to executing their escape plan successfully. He shows intelligence, persistence, and leadership that any wife should be proud of. However, Lois never acknowledges these positive qualities, instead focusing on minor inconveniences rather than celebrating her husband's capabilities and achievements. Lois treats Peter's success like it was accidental. When they finally discover the ultimate joke turns out to be, guess what, chicken butt, Lois acts like their entire adventure was pointless, rather than recognizing that Peter's determination led to solving a genuine mystery. She fails to appreciate that her husband's persistence uncovered an international conspiracy and saved them from a criminal organization. Her inability to recognize Peter's success shows fundamental disrespect for his accomplishments. Lois never acknowledges her own role in creating problems. Throughout the entire episode, Lois consistently undermines Peter's decisions and questions his judgment, creating additional stress and conflict during already difficult situations. However, she never takes responsibility for how her lack of support made their dangerous adventure more difficult than it needed to be. She acts like Peter is solely responsible for their problems while ignoring how her negative attitude contributed to their struggles. Summary: in The Splendid source, Peter Griffin shows admirable dedication to protecting his family by investigating inappropriate content affecting his son Chris, but his wife Lois consistently undermines his efforts, questions his judgment, and fails to provide emotional support during their dangerous adventure. Despite Peter's heroic actions in saving their lives from armed criminals and uncovering an international conspiracy, Lois never shows appreciation for his intelligence, bravery, or problem-solving abilities. Her constant negativity and lack of wifely support throughout their life-threatening ordeal demonstrates fundamental disrespect for her husband's leadership and protective instincts. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Peter Problems. Peter achieves career success only to have it destroyed by reckless behavior. Peter finally gets a well-deserved promotion at work to forklift operator and quickly masters the position, even treating his co-workers to entertainment and fun activities. This shows Peter's natural leadership abilities and his capacity to excel when given proper opportunities. However, his success is completely undermined when he makes the catastrophic decision to chug an entire vat of beer during work hours, causing him to pass out and crash into an executive meeting. Any reasonable person would recognize this as grounds for immediate termination, but Peter's reckless behavior costs him the best job opportunity he's ever had. Lois immediately starts nagging, instead of offering support after Peter's job loss. Rather than providing emotional support or understanding after Peter loses his job due to a momentary lapse in judgment, Lois immediately begins nagging him about finding new employment. She shows no sympathy for the fact that Peter had finally found a job he was good at and enjoyed, focusing only on criticizing him for the mistake that cost him his position. A supportive wife would help her husband through this difficult time and work together on solutions, but Lois chooses to add pressure and criticism when Peter needs encouragement most. Lois makes unilateral decisions about family finances without consulting Peter. Instead of discussing their financial situation like equal partners, Lois decides on her own to get a job as an assistant manager at a grocery store. She doesn't consult Peter about this major life change or consider how it might affect their family dynamic and his role as head of household. This shows fundamental disrespect for Peter's position in their marriage and her tendency to make important decisions without considering his feelings or input about their family's direction. Lois abandons her household responsibilities and dumps everything on Peter. When Lois starts working at the grocery store, she completely abandons her traditional role as homemaker and forces Peter to take over all household responsibilities without any training or preparation. Rather than gradually transitioning duties or working together to manage both work and home responsibilities, she simply dumps everything on Peter while pursuing her own career goals. This shows selfish prioritization of her own ambitions over family stability and her husband's well-being. Lois expects romance, despite creating massive stress in Peter's life. After working all day and then coming home to manage household duties he's not prepared for, Peter finds himself overwhelmed and exhausted. However, when Lois comes home from work, she immediately expects romantic intimacy without considering the psychological and physical toll her career decision has placed on her husband. She's created a situation where Peter is struggling to handle responsibilities he never agreed to take on, yet still expects him to perform as a lover on demand. Peter develops performance issues due to the pressure Lois has created. The stress of suddenly being forced into the role of household manager while dealing with unemployment causes Peter to develop erectile dysfunction, a serious medical condition that requires understanding and patience from his partner. This is a direct result of the overwhelming pressure and role reversal that Lois imposed on their marriage without his consent. Any caring wife would recognize her role in creating this problem and work to reduce the stress on her husband. The family publicly humiliates Peter, instead of offering support. Rather than treating Peter's medical condition with the privacy and sensitivity it deserves, the family openly mocks and humiliates him about his erectile dysfunction. This adds psychological trauma to an already difficult situation and shows complete lack of respect for Peter's dignity as a man and head of household. Instead of creating a supportive environment for healing, they make his condition worse through public embarrassment and ridicule. Lois sends Peter to an incompetent doctor, instead of addressing root causes. When Lois finally acknowledges Peter's medical issue, she sends him to Dr. Hartman, who provides no useful help or treatment for his condition. Rather than recognizing that the problem stems from the stress she's created in their marriage, Lois treats it as purely a medical issue that can be fixed by a doctor. She refuses to take responsibility for how her career decisions and abandonment of household duties created the psychological pressure causing Peter's dysfunction. Before we continue with how Peter's friends try to help him recover his masculinity, make sure to subscribe if you're following this breakdown of Family Guy's most emasculating wife moments. Peter has to rely on friends because his wife won't address the real problem. Since Lois refuses to acknowledge her role in Peter's condition, he's forced to turn to his friends at the Drunken Clam for help with his erectile dysfunction. Joe, Cleveland, and Quagmire volunteer to help him regain his sexual confidence through various methods, showing more loyalty and support than his own wife. The fact that Peter has to seek help from friends rather than receiving understanding from his spouse demonstrates how completely Lois has failed as a partner. Lois's career ambitions have destroyed Peter's sense of masculine identity. The various attempts by Peter's friends to restore his sexual function fail because the root problem isn't medical. 2.6. It's psychological damage from having his traditional masculine role undermined by his wife's career priorities. Lois has emasculated Peter by forcing him into a submissive household role while she becomes the primary breadwinner, destroying his confidence and sense of purpose as a man and husband. Peter only recovers when he reclaims his traditional role as provider. Quagmire correctly identifies that the solution to Peter's problem is getting his old job back, recognizing that Peter's erectile dysfunction is directly connected to his loss of traditional masculine identity as the family provider. When Quagmire helps Peter convince Angela to rehire him, and Peter redeems a rehire coupon, Peter immediately regains both his job and his sexual confidence. This proves that Lois's career ambitions were the direct cause of their marital problems. Lois immediately wants sex at work when Peter regains his provider status. The moment Peter tells Lois he got his job back, she immediately becomes sexually interested again, and they have intercourse right in the grocery store where she works. This shows that Lois was never really concerned about Peter's medical condition. She was simply not attracted to him when he wasn't fulfilling his role as primary breadwinner. Her instant sexual availability when he reclaims his job proves she only values him for his economic utility, not as a person. Lois's workplace affair shows complete disrespect for professional boundaries. By having sex with Peter at her workplace, Lois demonstrates complete disregard for professional standards and appropriate behavior. She's willing to risk her job and reputation for immediate sexual gratification, showing the same impulsive decision-making that characterizes all her major life choices. This reckless behavior could result in her termination and public humiliation, proving she doesn't think through the consequences of her actions. The marriage only functions when Peter maintains traditional masculine dominance. The episode clearly demonstrates that Peter and Lois's marriage only works when he maintains his traditional role as provider and she remains in a supportive position. When Lois tried to become the breadwinner and forced Peter into household management, it destroyed their sexual relationship and created massive dysfunction. Only when Peter reclaimed his masculine role did their marriage return to normal functioning. Summary: in this episode, Peter Griffin achieves career success as a forklift operator but loses his job due to workplace drinking, leading Lois to nag him constantly and unilaterally decide to get her own job at a grocery store. Her career ambitions force Peter into unfamiliar household responsibilities that create psychological stress, resulting in erectile dysfunction that the family publicly mocks. Only when Peter's friends help him reclaim his old job and traditional role as provider does his sexual confidence return, proving that Lois's attempts at role reversal were the direct cause of their marital dysfunction. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Big Man on Hippocampus. Big Man on Hippocampus. Peter's drinking problem leads to memory loss and medical crisis. Peter's excessive drinking finally catches up with him when he develops amnesia, creating a serious medical emergency that requires immediate attention and family support. Rather than taking responsibility for enabling Peter's alcoholism over the years, Lois acts shocked by this development, as if she had no role in allowing his drinking to reach dangerous levels. Any caring wife would have intervened in Peter's alcohol abuse long before it caused brain damage, but Lois ignored the warning signs until it became a life-threatening crisis. Lois immediately sexualizes Peter's medical emergency. Instead of focusing on Peter's serious neurological condition and recovery needs, Lois's first concern is reminding Peter about their sexual encounter the night before his amnesia. She calls herself hot stuff and brings up their intimate relationship while her husband is suffering from brain trauma that could be permanent. A responsible wife would prioritize medical care and recovery, not try to use her husband's vulnerable mental state for sexual validation and attention. Peter expresses desire to have sex with his own children due to brain damage. Peter's amnesia causes him to lose understanding of appropriate family relationships, leading him to suggest sexual activity with his children since he can't remember they're his kids. While this is clearly a result of his medical condition, it reveals the toxic family environment Lois has created, where boundaries are so unclear that even brain-damaged Peter considers this acceptable behavior. The fact that this suggestion doesn't completely shock the family shows how dysfunctional their household has become. The family publicly humiliates Peter during his medical crisis. Rather than protecting Peter's dignity during his vulnerable state, the family allows him to embarrass himself on national television by appearing on Family Feud while suffering from severe amnesia. They put him in a situation where his cognitive impairment will be broadcast to millions of viewers, showing complete disregard for his privacy and reputation. Any loving family would shield a brain-injured member from public exposure, not exploit his condition for potential prize money. Lois prioritizes game show winnings over Peter's medical treatment. Instead of focusing on getting Peter proper medical care and therapy for his amnesia, Lois becomes obsessed with winning money on Family Feud. She sees Peter's condition as an opportunity for financial gain rather than a serious health crisis requiring immediate attention. She's literally exploiting her husband's brain injury for entertainment and profit, showing her true priorities when it comes to his well-being versus her personal desires. Peter's memory loss reveals how little his family actually knows him. When the family tries to help Peter remember who they are, it becomes clear that none of them really understand his interests, personality, or inner life. They're shocked when Peter gives an obscure Star Trek reference that turns out to be correct, revealing they've never paid attention to his actual thoughts and knowledge. This shows how superficial their relationships have always been, and how little effort they've made to connect with Peter as a person. Lois uses Peter's amnesia as an excuse to pursue other men. While Peter is struggling with memory loss and trying to understand his basic identity, Lois goes on a date with their neighbor, Quagmire, a known sexual predator. She's literally abandoning her brain-injured husband to pursue romantic attention from another man, showing complete lack of loyalty during Peter's time of greatest need. Any decent wife would dedicate herself to helping her husband recover, not use his medical crisis as an opportunity to explore other relationships. The family treats Peter's condition like entertainment rather than tragedy. Throughout Peter's amnesia episode, the family consistently treats his cognitive impairment as amusing rather than tragic. They laugh at his confusion, exploit his condition for game show appearances, and fail to provide the serious medical support he needs. Chris even takes advantage of Peter's memory loss to run around naked, showing how the entire family sees Peter's brain injury as an opportunity for their own entertainment rather than a serious health crisis. Before we continue analyzing how Lois abandons her husband during his medical emergency, make sure to subscribe if you're following this breakdown of Family Guy's most disloyal wife moments. Lois shows no concern for Peter's long-term recovery needs. Dr. Hartman clearly states that Peter's amnesia could last anywhere from seconds to millenniums, indicating this is a serious neurological condition requiring ongoing medical monitoring and potential rehabilitation. However, Lois shows no interest in developing a treatment plan, consulting specialists, or creating a supportive recovery environment. She's more concerned with immediate gratification and game show appearances than ensuring Peter gets proper medical care. Peter's friends show more loyalty than his own wife. When Brian realizes that Lois is on a date with Quagmire while Peter is suffering from amnesia, he immediately tries to alert Peter to this betrayal. Even the family dog recognizes that Lois's behavior is inappropriate and disloyal, while she feels no guilt about abandoning her brain-injured husband. This shows that Peter's pet has more understanding of marital commitment than his own wife. Lois exploits Peter's vulnerability for personal gain. Throughout the Family Feud appearance, Lois takes advantage of Peter's impaired judgment and memory loss to manipulate him into following her lead for money. She's using his medical condition to control his behavior for her financial benefit, showing complete disregard for his autonomy and dignity as a person. She treats her brain-injured husband like a tool for winning prize money rather than a vulnerable person needing care and protection. The family creates dangerous situations for Peter's impaired mind. By allowing Peter to wander around with severe amnesia, potentially engage with strangers, and participate in high-pressure television appearances, the family puts him at risk for further psychological trauma or exploitation. They should be creating a safe, controlled environment for his recovery, but instead, they expose him to situations that could worsen his condition or create new problems. Lois never takes responsibility for enabling Peter's destructive drinking. The amnesia is clearly a result of Peter's chronic alcoholism, which Lois has enabled and ignored for years. Rather than acknowledging her role in allowing his drinking problem to reach dangerous levels, she treats his memory loss like an unavoidable accident. A responsible spouse would recognize their part in failing to intervene in destructive behavior before it caused permanent brain damage. Lois allows Peter to be publicly ridiculed on national television. During the Family Feud appearance, Lois watches silently as Peter embarrasses himself repeatedly on national television, failing to understand basic game show concepts due to his brain injury. When he keeps answering chair to every question and can't comprehend simple instructions from Richard Dawson, Lois makes no attempt to protect him from public humiliation. She allows millions of viewers to witness her husband's cognitive impairment for entertainment, showing she values potential prize money more than preserving Peter's dignity during his medical crisis. Peter's correct answer exposes how little Lois knows about her husband. When Peter gives an obscure Star Trek reference about Captain Picard's flute that turns out to be correct, Lois is completely shocked and asks, "Peter, how did you?" This reveals that after years of marriage, she has no understanding of Peter's interests, knowledge, or inner life. She's so disconnected from her husband as a person that even his amnesia-affected brain knows things about him that surprise her. This shows fundamental failure as a wife to connect with or understand the man she married. Lois prioritizes game show host attention over her husband's needs. When meeting Richard Dawson, Lois becomes flirtatious and gives him an inappropriately passionate French kiss, telling him she wants to be his pinky ring while her brain-injured husband stands right next to her. She's using this television appearance as an opportunity to flirt with a celebrity rather than focusing on helping Peter through his medical crisis. Her sexual behavior with another man in front of her disabled husband shows complete disrespect for their marriage vows. The family enables Peter's dangerous behavior during recovery. Rather than creating structure and boundaries to help Peter recover safely, the family allows him to make inappropriate jokes, wander around confused, and participate in activities beyond his current cognitive abilities. They should be working with medical professionals to create a rehabilitation plan, but instead, they treat his condition like a temporary inconvenience that requires no serious intervention or lifestyle changes. Lois abandons Peter when he needs her most. The episode clearly shows that when Peter faces his most serious health crisis, requiring maximum support and dedication from his wife, Lois instead chooses to pursue her own interests and entertainment. She dates other men, flirts with celebrities, and treats his condition as an opportunity for personal gain rather than a tragedy requiring her full attention and care. This reveals her true character when tested by genuine adversity. Peter's amnesia creates opportunity for families' selfish behavior. Each family member uses Peter's memory loss as an excuse to pursue their own selfish interests, rather than focusing on his recovery. Chris strips naked thinking he's invisible. Meg makes inappropriate sexual jokes, and Stewie gives disturbing answers during the game show. This shows how Peter's leadership and presence normally keeps the family functioning, and without his guidance, everyone descends into selfish behavior. The medical system fails Peter. Due to Lois's negligence, Dr. Hartman's vague and unhelpful diagnosis suggests that Lois hasn't demanded proper medical care or specialist consultation for Peter's serious neurological condition. She accepts inadequate medical attention without fighting for better treatment, showing she doesn't value Peter's health enough to advocate for him when he can't advocate for himself during his cognitive impairment. Summary: in this episode, Peter Griffin develops amnesia from excessive drinking, leading to dangerous confusion about family relationships and inappropriate sexual comments about his children. Rather than focusing on his medical recovery, Lois immediately sexualizes his condition, abandons him to date Quagmire, and exploits his impaired state to appear on Family Feud for money. She flirts with Richard Dawson while Peter suffers from brain injury, reveals she knows nothing about her husband's interests despite years of marriage, and allows him to be publicly humiliated on television. The family treats Peter's serious neurological condition as entertainment, while failing to provide proper medical support or create a safe recovery environment, with even the family dog showing more loyalty than Peter's own wife. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.